Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the June 11th, 2019 meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors and our budget hearings. Would the clerk please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Good morning. Supervisor Cerna?
Here.
Peters? Here. Frost? Here. Natoli? Here. Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum. This meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors is cablecast live on the Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed caption and is webcast at sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated Friday, June 14th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. This meeting is also broadcast live on KUBU Radio on 96.5 FM. A DVD copy is available for checkout from any local library branch. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may fill out a speaker slip and hand it to staff. When the chair calls your name, please come to the podium. Also, please silence your electronic devices at this time.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we are going to item number 2, which is the fiscal year 2019 recommended budget hearings.
Chairman Kennedy and members of the board, pleased to present to you the recommended budget. And Britt's going to walk us through most of the budget departments. There are 2 departmental presentations we have for you once Britt gets done, which is going to be Department of Human Assistance and Department of Child, Family, and Adult Services. So with that, I was going to give Britt the opportunity to start the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Britt Ferguson, the county's Chief Fiscal Officer. This morning I will be presenting an overview of the fiscal year 2019-20 recommended budget, which is fully balanced as required by state law. To begin then, the budget overall totals $4.4 billion, all funds. That's a $104.6 million or 2.4% increase. And that increase is the net result of increases and decreases in a number of funds, but mainly due to an increase of $109.9 million in the general and restricted funds, and I'll talk later about why we look at those funds together. An increase of $34.4 million in the transportation-related funds, due mostly to shifts in construction project timelines and additional road overlay work funded with higher gas tax, SB1, and federal revenue. An increase of $28.9 million in the Economic Development Fund, due primarily to the transfer of money held in non-budgeted funds into this fund. This is part of a larger effort, which included the creation of the restricted funds that your board's aware of, to convert non-budgeted funds, holding county money to budgeted funds, or move that money into budgeted funds for greater transparency. In this case, the money is federal revenue that can only be used for remediation at the former McClellan and Mather Air Force bases that the county has received over the years, but has never been recognized as revenue. The money will in fact not all be spent in fiscal year 1920. And then finally, a $40.2 million decrease in the airport systems funds, that's airport systems and capital outlay funds, due mostly to the timing of expenditures on capital outlays. And there I'll just mention that with regard to the capital outlay in the airport funds as well as other funds, there will be a true-up that will be conducted after the books close, and we'll likely see, in this case, probably significant revisions in terms of the capital projects funding in that fund. Again, the overall county budget, $4.4 billion. That's comprised of enterprise, special revenue, and internal service funds of about $1.7 billion. That includes funds like solid waste, airport, transportation, which includes roads, transportation sales tax, water resources, economic development, building inspection, various internal service funds like general services, technology, capital construction, liability, property insurance. All of this money is earmarked for certain purposes, and there's an example of what some of them are. It includes the general fund, $1.8 billion in appropriations, including both discretionary revenue state and federal revenue and departmental revenues, and the restricted funds with $918 million. That includes things like the realignment and Proposition 172 funds, as well as the Mental Health Services Act and certain other funds. It's important to look at those together because generally the money in the restricted funds is transferred to the general fund as a reimbursement or negative expenditure. So you really have to add those two together to get the overall picture of what's happening in terms of the general fund. And together those two add up to about $2.7 billion in expenditures.
Excuse me, Britt.
Yeah.
Supervisor Serna.
Thank you. Before you leave that slide, I appreciate this slide. I think we've had it for the last 2 or 3 budget cycles to help explain what is somewhat a complicated budget structure for the public. What I didn't hear you mention, Britt, which I would like you to speak to again for the benefit of the public, is the relationship between the Enterprise and Special Revenues Fund versus the general fund, and the fact that they're not interchangeable.
Right. The enterprise and special revenue funds typically either account for they account for money that is dedicated to a particular purpose. Enterprise funds are funds that sort of operate like a business and basically live off the revenue that they earn, such as the airport fund, the water fund, those sorts of things, solid waste. And then the special revenue funds typically reflect money that comes from a specific revenue source that can only be used for those purposes. And an example of that would be building inspection fund, which receives building fees, can only be used to fund building inspection activities.
And just by way of example, for instance, if a member of the public felt concerned about potential reductions in, let's say, child support, I'm just picking a general fund category, and they sought to transfer, they want to advocate taking money from airports to fill the gap in child support, that's not permissible by law.
That's not permissible by law. That money is earmarked for the purposes for which it is received, and that's why it's put in these funds as opposed to put in the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I should also note, and you're well aware of this, Supervisor Cerna, and the other members are, that doesn't mean that some of the money that goes into the general fund is not also limited in what it can be used for. Their general fund is a mix of discretionary revenue, what we call semi-discretionary revenue, like realignment of Prop 172, and actually money that is also earmarked for particular purposes.
Thank you.
So general fund and restricted funds total $2.73 billion in expenditures, a $109.8 million or 4.2% increase in expenditures. The budget units with the largest expenditure increases include the Sheriff's Department with a $39.5 million or 7.9% increase in expenditures, due primarily to an increase in salary and benefit costs for existing employees and approximately $9 million in newer enhanced programs, what we call growth, mostly additional staffing and other costs in the jails related to conditions of confinement issues identified in the recent lawsuit against the county. The Human Assistance Aid Payments budget is the next largest increase with a $24.2 million or 6.3% increase. This is the budget unit that provides assistance payments for various entitlement programs, and the increase is due to a combination of policy changes and caseload and case cost trends, including an increase to the CalWORKs grants as part of an effort to bring the grant levels up to 50% of the federal poverty level. That's a state mandate. A 4.23% legislated California Necessities Index, or CNI, increase to grant levels in multiple programs, and the final step of a phased-in increase to general assistance grants. The health services budget with a $14 million or 3.3% increase, due primarily to an increase in salary and benefit costs for existing employees and budgeting for a full year of the Medi-Cal alcohol and drug services expansion that was budgeted for half a year in fiscal year 18-19. The Human Assistance Administration budget with a $9.7 million or 3% increase, due primarily to increases in contract costs for various programs. In particular, the budget reflects the receipt of an additional $7 million in State Homeless Emergency Aid, HEAP, and California Emergency Solutions and Housing, or CSEH, funding to expand the county's emergency shelter and rehousing programs. and Correctional Health Services with a $9.5 million or 17.4% increase due primarily to salary and benefit cost increases for existing employees and approximately $5.3 million in growth to fund additional staff and contract costs related to the conditions of confinement in the jails identified in the recent lawsuit. This $109.8 million or 4.2% increase in expenditures in the general and restricted funds is funded by a $17.4 million or 2.7% increase in discretionary revenue and reimbursements. So that is the local money, property tax, sales tax, hotel tax, the money that the board has complete discretion over the use of. That's a 2.7% increase. Property tax, that's the county's largest source of discretionary revenue, is projected to increase by $27.5 million or 6.2%. But sales tax, our second largest source, is only increasing by 3.5%, and the fiscal year 18-19 budget included $14 million in one-time discretionary revenue, which will not be available in fiscal year 2019-20. Also, a $29.9 million or 3.8% increase in semi-discretionary reimbursements, including an $8.8 million or 1.7% increase in non-CalWORKs realignment reimbursement, and that's the realignment that can be used most flexibly to cover various costs. A $12.9 million or 9.5% increase in CalWORKs realignment, and that it increases or decreases with CalWORKs costs, so you can't move that around to spend on other things. And an $8.3 million or 6.7% increase in Proposition 172 revenue or reimbursements. Then there's an $11.8 million or 12.8% increase in reimbursements from other restricted funds. That includes a $7.5 million increase in Mental Health Services Act, that's MHSA reimbursements. There's a net $27.3 million or 2.6% increase in federal, state, and local revenues from other sources. The net increase is only 2.6%, partly because there are reductions in a number of revenue sources, including the CalWORKs single allocation, the CalFresh administration allocation, Adult Protective Services revenue, Elk Grove Animal Shelter contract revenue, and elections-related revenue, among others. There's also a $9.6 million increase in the use of general fund reserves compared to the use of reserves amounts in the FY 2018-19 adopted budget. We are proposing to cancel $12.3 million in general fund reserves to help balance the budget. $3 million of the reserve for audit report paybacks future litigation costs. The entire $324,000 technology upgrades reserve, and $9 million in general reserves. The fiscal year 18-19 adopted budget was balanced by canceling $2.8 million in reserves, so you can see the difference. And then finally, there's a $5.7 million increase in the use of available fund balance. We are estimating the general fund available fund balance carry forward from the end of this fiscal year will be $75 million, and that compares to $69.3 million at the beginning of the fiscal year 18-19 fiscal year that was included in that adopted budget. Despite revenue growth, some reductions in current staffing and programs, that's the requested base budget as we refer to it, are necessary to produce a balanced budget. Here are some of the factors driving the need to make program reductions. Your board is well aware that we recently, a couple years ago, settled a long-standing lawsuit with the UC Davis health system that obligates us to spend approximately $7.8 million a year, at least in the early years and growing in future years, as a settlement of that lawsuit. The total amount we will pay over 15 years, that goes on for 15 years, will be $93.6 million. You're also well aware of the jail lawsuit that we've been dealing with. The fiscal year 19-20 budget includes $21.7 million in additional funding for operating and capital improvement in the jails to address the issues of confinement that were identified in that lawsuit. This $21.7 million in new programs and services is in addition to the $10 million worth of investments approved in the fiscal year 18-19 adopted budget, although only half of that was actually included in that year's budget because it was for part of a year. The full amount is now reflected in this year's budget, so that it doubles that amount for this year's budget. So in addition to that, there is a $24.2 million increase in the human assistance aid payments budget, as I mentioned earlier. That reflects increases in public assistance programs like CalWORKS, foster care, general assistance. In some cases, that's due to caseload increases, but the increase is mostly driven by things like state-mandated increases in the grant requirements that I mentioned above.
Excuse me, Britt. Supervisor Natoli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Britt, I want to go back to the first two bullet points on the UC Davis settlement. So we're in year 2 of 15 or year 3?
We're in year 2.
In year
1920 will be the second year.
This is the second year?
Fiscal year 1920 will be the second year.
Oh, the second year?
Yes. Last year was this current year, fiscal year 18-19 is the first year.
And so, as you said, this does increase. I think out of year 6 or 7, it bumps up to what, 8.9?
So what happens is, yes, it starts to go up, and then in about fiscal year 10 or so, there is a balloon payment of about $15 million. It goes up to about $15 million, and then it's tied to an index, so which will probably increase it slightly over time as we go along.
Okay. I know that we talked about having discussions with folks, and again, they're our partner in healthcare in this community, along with many others, and so I trust that we're at least have some conversation with the health systems.
We have approached them, and we'll continue having the discussion given the fiscal condition we have. So yes, we are.
Because what we're looking going forward here, the picture's a lot fuzzier than it may have been even a couple of years ago. All right, then on the jail lawsuit, how much of that $21.7 million is would be considered one-time money because and maybe you're going to get to an ensuing slide. I didn't have a chance to look through this, so I don't want to get ahead of you. One time in the sense that for the capital side, which again will have a long tail to it as well potentially, and then what's recurring and and there's additive, and so if we're looking at $21.7 million this year, is that becoming somewhat of a base consideration? If so, could you break that out for me, Britt? And
Sure. Approximately $8 million. Well, exactly $8 million of that amount reflects money that is being will be used as part of the initial planning, programming, and design for improvements to the jails, including potentially the addition of a jail annex in order to meet certain needs. The estimated total cost of that effort, the planning, programming, and design effort, is about $16 to $18 million. This would be the first year of that. It's about a 2-year process. So in a sense, that's a 2-year commitment. On the other hand, the outcome of that will likely be a bond issue to make the improvements, a COP issue to make the improvements, and we estimate that depending on the magnitude of that, it'll probably be more than that $8 million a year in debt service costs going forward over the next 20 to 30 years. So really, it's pretty much all ongoing costs. There will also be increases in costs because the various improvements that we think will likely need to be made in order to address the issues that have been identified do not stop with the improvements that were made last year, the 10 million or the 21 or the basically 11 or so million and 12 million in operating costs this year, but we expect those to increase probably in the $8 to $10 million a year range, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, to address all of the issues that will need to be addressed.
Is there a way to, again, I'm following you, and obviously for those in the audience, it may be even more difficult to follow. So if you could just kind of chart that out. So if out of the 21 million, I understood that, the 8 million, and there would probably be double that for design, planning, engineering costs for what would be a capital bonding program for a facility of some sort, whatever that is. And then there would be ongoing costs to what you said, probably equal to that or maybe more. And then you said we added money last year's budget, 11 million, did I understand it correctly? So,
right, roughly.
So,
yes.
So what we're looking at here is right now, the number that's been assigned over the last 2 years is roughly almost $33 million.
That would be roughly correct, yes.
Okay. And then what I also understood you to say was that would look to increase over the course of the next several years by how much?
So it's the process that we're going through is basically what we've described as an iterative process where we will be making investments and seeing what we can accomplish, and
Right.
how much it takes to do that will be unknown until we achieve what we set out to do. But our rough estimate is that it will be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 8 to 10 million additional expenditures a year over the next, say, 3 years.
Additive.
Additive
Cumulative.
to what's already been
if it's
spent.
33 this year, maybe 43 now. Again, I'm just using for illustrative purposes. And then it could be 53 the next year, and it could be 63 at the end of that. Again, related to what you said, there may be some system improvements that address that number, but that's the estimate. And so when you get to year 3 or 4, is 60, 65, is that topping out?
I think that's probably, if you take into account, inflation and everything else,
I know.
Don't hold us to that number, but in that ballpark range, I think that is what we would be looking at,
Okay.
yes.
Because the reason I asked that is I think it's important to understand that what we're staring down here this year is, is probably, I guess, the second installment, if I could use that term, and that what we're looking at, installments that will go on forever, potentially. I guess not potentially, because they're going to get built into what we do, but that this ratcheting up will present itself very clearly next year and the year thereafter and probably the year after that. And it's so the capacity that you addressed earlier in your revenues side of it, I mean, those become part of the operating base, basically.
They do. That's exactly what happens. You're exactly correct.
Okay. If I could just ask you one other question, because I think it's relevant maybe to the conversations we have about some of the needs we're going to hear about where reductions have been anticipated this year and maybe ongoing in some cases, or many cases, is the cost recovery for what we're going to invest in architecture, design, and anything that would lead up to obviously future board considerations here for bonded indebtedness to actually do additional facility work. Are not those costs recoverable in the bond? You still you fund it all this year and next year, $16 million, whatever the number comes out to be, but I think one of the considerations would be is if you could recover those costs and roll them into, just as you would a lot of building projects, that if you incur costs to get to the point of actually issuing the bonds and constructing something. And so is that something that your office would be looking at, you would present to us, so that would allow us maybe in some out years, this board and the county to recover some of those back to the general fund?
We will absolutely look at it, but I think, as you know, our credit rating is not the best. And the more we add on to the principal, the higher our future payments will be. So that's the balance we have to do as we bring that recommendation back to you, is that how much more do we add to that principal? How much cash have we already put in to get a favorable interest rate from our future borrowers?
But spreading out over 30 years, we're soaking in, $8 million general fund dollars this year just into design.
So it's about $16 million that we're going to put in for design. And that's going to be part of the consideration, is what does that end up doing to our bond issuance?
Right.
So we will definitely look at it, but I just want to give that caveat that we, since our ratings are not the best.
I understand.
It's a difficult task on that.
Yeah, it's a balance, you said, yeah, but I guess the reason I raised that point is because, there's a lot of dynamics here, and I think it's embodied, obviously, in this budget and some of the policy discussion around, what we do, not only settlement of lawsuits and in variety of conditions, but and I will probably sound like a broken record throughout the day, but is that part of that balance for this board member, and I think it's appropriate to say it right here at this point in time without belaboring, is that there are 1.5 million people in this county that in one way or another are touched by county services and programs, and that when we take up the capacity to address needs, and whether they be litigated or otherwise, and you take an $8 million hit just for design of a facility out of the general fund, it's not there, but it also affects then the reserve computations that affect our credit rating. And so I know there's a lot more to this than I would understand, certainly as a finance officer, but that is a consideration for this board is we're currently constructed, but also as we set the stage for many years to come, because bonded indebtedness can be for 30 years. These obligations, as we're talking 15
and forever commitments in some cases, those are big. And I think the ability to grow on the revenue side are, they're limited. We don't control a lot of that, but we certainly control to the degree that we make decisions about how this money is expended. And when I look at some of the programs and services, and certainly the work you bring us in the recommended budget, that is a consideration for me, is how we might at least regain some of that. And yeah, it may be an annual type of exercise, but it's still important because that 1.5 million people that we have responsibility to, and whether they're in custody, in care, or just drive on the county roads and experience the fun of all that, it's still important that we, in a given year, and I know you bring us a balance, but I want to have that conversation today because I think it certainly sets the stage for what we are being asked to do today, and certainly in the ensuing years. And I think it's big. And we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking millions and tens of millions of dollars. And so, anytime we can at least have that conversation, recognizing that you've scrubbed this and you bring a lot of things that are tied together here. Credit ratings, are important. But if we're going to have to do that and take on long-term indebtedness, I would like to see maybe some recovery for the general fund, so that in the short term, that we have some ability to maintain some of the services and programs that I believe, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree, are very critical to the quality of life here in Sacramento County, and are reasons for people to want to stay here, to start a business here, to raise their family here. And so I say that this morning because, again, that to me is, in my mind, is an important backdrop for what we're doing on the finance side of this. So,
okay.
Thanks.
So the next.
Hang on, we have Supervisor Cerna.
Sorry.
Thank you. So I appreciate Supervisor Tully's comments. I think it's the appropriate tone for this hearing and our discussion later. I wanted to get some clarity on one of the things you mentioned about the UC Davis health system settlement. Britt, you mentioned that in the 10th of the 15th fiscal year that we have a balloon payment?
No, it's around the 9th or 10th fiscal year, yes, we have a balloon payment. It's 15 years total.
I understand.
Around the 9th or 10th, we have about a $15 million balloon payment.
So my question is, how do we account for that today? Are we, in addition to what our annual payment is leading up to that 9th or 10th year, are we somehow putting money in an account somewhere to help us defray basically the additional impact that we're going to feel that 10th year?
So we are not currently in the 1920 recommended budget doing that. We do have some remaining general reserves, which could deal with that as well as other things. But right now, given the constraints on the budget, we have not proposed setting aside additional money for that at this point.
When will we have the discussion about how to manage that? Well, otherwise, it seems like it's going to be a pretty sobering, not necessarily surprise because we're talking about it now, but it's going to be pretty sobering for everyone.
I think as we continue with our budgets, with the challenge we have this year, that conversation we need to have. But as we were putting this budget together, we did not tackle that.
Do you mind if I jump in on that? So if I recall, when we structured that settlement, we structured it in a way that the payments would be made so that as they go up, there's other obligations we have that are going down, and that's why we specifically did it in that time frame.
You're exactly right, Supervisor Kennedy. Part of the logic behind the whole idea behind the balloon payment was we wanted to stretch it out longer. They wanted to put it shorter, but we knew that at about we structured the balloon payment to occur when we have a significant reduction in our other debt service costs.
Right. So the statement about the balloon payment is not a net statement, right?
It's not dollar for dollar, but it is. But it was designed.
Well, that's a really, really important distinction. Otherwise,
you
leave this board and the public with an understanding that you're going to have double the cost that 10th year, and that's concerning to me.
I think
9 years away from that.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken. It was just what the payment looks like, and as Supervisor Kennedy just recalled, there are other obligations that are rolling in and out, and that structure was set up, now that I recall, that it will take some of that doubling up down. So as we get closer, I think we're going to start talking more about it, show what the net result will be. But we'll keep that in the back of our mind.
Okay. And then lastly, relative to the back and forth about the jail annex and the cost of that and the expected initial 16 to 18 million for design. What I've not seen any bid or estimate that tells me it's 16 or 18 or has a contingency of 10% or 15% or no percent. We're being asked to make some difficult decisions today about some unfunded growth requests. So I don't know that I necessarily feel too comfortable. It's not that I don't necessarily believe you, but I because we're being asked to make some difficult decisions, I need a comfort level to understand that that's what the cost really is. And I'd like to understand, for instance, if our burn rate on design costs the next fiscal year, 1920 fiscal year, if we don't use let's say a quarter of that for whatever reason, how that factors into our decision today about our consideration of unfunded growth requests is a little disturbing, because we are belt tightening because we have to. I get that. But that means we need to scrutinize the budget all that much more to make sure that we're not leaving anything overlooked in terms of funding some very, very important programs.
What I can tell you is this estimate of the costs came from the General Services Department, and what I can tell you is we are, as you know, with the lawsuit, under pressure to make these improvements very quickly for a construction project that will likely be of this magnitude. And so we are already moving forward on some of the work, and I think whether we spend the full $8 million this year or need to spend a little more this year or a little less this year, a little more next year, it's hard to say exactly, but it's certainly clear to me from the information provided by General Services that it will cost us more than $8 million, probably between 16 and 18 million. Exactly how much, we don't know. And exact timing, we don't know, but we are going to move as quickly as we can because of the pressure to get this done as quickly as we can.
And I think you have no argument from any of us that that's a priority. It has to be. But my concern and line of questioning stems from a place of, this is both kind of a budget decision-making exercise in its classic sense in terms of just appropriating funds, but it also requires us to be very careful about how we manage cash flow based on our budget discussions, because again, we have other pressing needs in the community, and we're being forced to balance the expense of a new jail annex. And for instance, if we don't use $1 million of the design cost this year, could that savings be better used in the coming fiscal year, with an understanding that we're going to be able to complete the design process next year? It's a cash flow exercise in my estimation.
So I think the bottom line is if we don't spend it this year, then we would spend it in the following year, and we'd be facing a similar sort of a situation. And I think, on the other hand, if we need more this year, then we'd have to face dealing with that issue down the road. So we thought this was a reasonable number, that it's prudent to set aside for this purpose. Again, once we start going on this, as your board knows, we're going to have to move forward on it, and there's not going to be the ability to sort of pull back realistically. So we would hate to under budget what we need in order to get this done.
I think part of the work we're going to do this year is going to tell us what the next year number is going to look like too. So if we do not budget $8 million, as I think Britt's point is that I think we all agree, internally we agree that next year then it could have that if we're short, we're going to have to go back in and find another $1 million. It starts compounding it for us. Our concern, quite frankly, is that we've put $8 million, and given some of the numbers that we've seen that the annex is going to cost, it concerns us that we've not put enough. I think that's what Britt was trying to get at, but I think our recommendations based on $8 million going forward, and not if we run into a situation that we don't have enough money, then we got to come back and talk to the board about it. But
I appreciate that, Nav. I think what you're hearing from Supervisor Tolley and myself, and others may chime in, is that there's an appreciation that we have to be extremely cautious and prudent this budget cycle and in the coming years as we face these long-term costs associated with litigation. But for me, at least, I don't want to be so overly cautious that we begin to forfeit in the process the ability to find resources for programs that, quite frankly, we're talking about a $4.4 billion all funds budget. Some of these programs that are potentially being cut are measured in the tens of thousands of dollars. So to me, it necessarily requires us to be this detailed and precise. Otherwise, we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not interested in doing that.
Supervisor Tolley.
Yeah, just one more point on all that. Certainly, I echo some of those sentiments as well. But it seems to me that it would warrant, this is the budget piece of it, but a workshop before this board, because if we're going to go into a major construction project, then I think getting some idea, obviously, you're going to have to bring some sort of a contract before us. You're going to have an RFP for design. That takes time. And assuming that takes, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever that is, I mean, that would be pretty miraculous if you did it in 30 days. Maybe you already set it in motion. But that, you're going to burn through $1 million a month just on, planning and that type of thing, because, there's a lot of logistics to go into it. Recognize you may ultimately end up with the same number, and to your point, you don't know until you start moving forward. But I think this is something, because, this will be the largest construction project probably in the last, beyond obviously the sanitation plant or airport facilities that we're going to do, and it's largely general fund, and then we have to bond for it, but it's general fund in its initiation. And so I think we ought to be able to have some opportunity to talk about that, not just at a time when you come forward with a RFP recommended firm to do the work. And I would just say that recognizing that there's a lot of unknowns in any budget, and you give it your best estimation, and there's some tentativeness. I get that relative to some of the other things that may or may not happen here. But when we're looking for a few $100,000, $1 million in this fiscal year, obviously there still may have to be paid at the end of the day, can be a lot of money. And I know that certainly, all of us, but several of us have spent, a lot of years when things have gotten tight, and when we were looking for nickels, to keep things alive. And so I just think that's important. These are big numbers, and they have lots of zeros behind them, but there's a lot of people that will go without certain aspects of things that are essential to their lives by decisions we make here. And so I frame it in that, and I know you take it seriously, but that's why I think we're going to need to probe that a little more deeply before we get done here today. Thanks.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. I just wanted to say we can probe it more deeply, but I think the expenses facing us on the jail are so horrific that we do need to be prudent about setting the appropriate amount of money aside so it doesn't worse the next year or the following year. And I think picking away at a little bit here and there is the wrong way to go. Thank you.
So the next factor that is driving the need for program reductions is a $9.3 million increase in IHSS provider payments costs. This includes a $7.5
I'm sorry, Britt. I apologize. I didn't see Supervisor Frost.
Sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to add to Supervisor Peters' comment by saying I think it's important that we have an extremely effective public outreach to let people know what's coming so that they don't feel blindsided. This year is the beginning of a few years of tough times, and I think we need to let people be on notice that cuts could be coming, and so that they can begin to look at other opportunities and prepare for it.
Now you may continue.
Thank you. As I mentioned, a $9.3 million increase in IHSS provider payments. That includes a $7.5 million increase in that's the in-home supportive services provider payments, the payment basically of wages to in-home caregivers. That includes a $7.5 million increase in the IHSS maintenance of effort requirement. And based on the new MOE structure approved by the legislature 2 years ago, as you know, we were originally expecting an MOE increase this year of as much as $20 million. However, after extensive work by CSAC and others, Governor Newsom proposed a revision to the MOE structure in his recommended state budget, and that results in the $7.5 million increase that you see here. In other words, it could have been a lot worse. The additional $2 million, the difference between the $7.5 million and the $9.3 million, is due to an increase in payments for IHSS caregiver health insurance. The contract with the union representing the caregivers obligates the county to pay 80 cents per hour worked by all caregivers toward health insurance costs, and the number of hours is projected to increase, as it has been for many years, actually increasing.
Could I ask you just a question? How many folks how many providers and how many folks are being served? Is it 21,000, 22,000? What's the number?
Right.
John, is that right? About 22?
25,000? No? Okay, thanks.
And I mentioned earlier, discretionary revenue and reimbursements are only projected to grow by 2.7%, and non-CalWORK semi-discretionary reimbursements are only projected to grow by 2.6%, and that lags the increase in expenditures. I also mentioned there are reductions in federal and state revenue for certain programs, including a $4.2 million reduction in the CalWORK single allocation, a $3.6 million reduction in the CalFresh administration allocation, and $4.2 million and a $4.2 million reduction in Title 19 Adult Protective Services revenue, the latter due to a correction of a claiming error that we had made in previous years. Salary and benefit increases for existing employees agreed to in the various labor agreements is another factor. The requested base general fund budget before program reductions or increases for newer enhanced programs reflected a $77.1 million or 6% increase in salary and benefit costs. This included cost of living and equity adjustments agreed to in contracts with the union representing county employees, as well as included in that is a $30 million or 15% increase in the county share of retirement costs for county employees. The latter is largely due to a decision by the Sacramento County Retirement System to reduce the assumed rate of return on system investments from 7.5% to 7%. Fiscal year 1920 will be the last year of a 3-year phase-in of the impact of this decision. The recommended budget includes $1 million for costs related to the Hardesty Schneider lawsuit. This represents the estimated cost of securing a surety bond, should it be necessary to avoid having to pay the full $105 million plus judgment while we appeal the decision to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then the recommended budget also includes $668,000 to pay for postcards and return postage for vote-by-mail ballots for the March 20th, 2020 primary election, as is now required by state law.
Supervisor Cerna.
Britt, there you go. So on that last bullet, with regard to the expected cost of postcards and postage associated with the 2020 primary election, have we already concluded that the Secretary of State's office does not have any kind of program or is not discussing some intent to help defray the cost for counties to implement their election process next year?
No, I'm not aware. There has been money available for various equipment, but I'm not aware of any additional money available to fund the actual operating costs associated with the requirements of the new sort of the vote-by-mail system that we are one of the pilot counties on.
And the only way we'd be able to find out about that is through the state's budgeting process, whether it's a line item somewhere?
Yeah, and we have not seen anything like that. We do monitor that. We've seen nothing like that.
So, but is it I guess hypothetically possible that when the state finalizes its budget later in the late summer that that could materialize? That, I mean, that's a possibility, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in county government here in California for almost 20 years, so I would say, with regard to the state budget, almost anything is possible, and so often at the last minute. But that's not been an issue that has been, you know, as we, our lobbyists, CSAC, our departments are involved with various budget issues. This has not been an issue that we have seen any indication that is going to be provided.
Well, and there's probably something to be said for the fact that adjustments to the budget too are a reflection of strong advocacy, in this case on behalf of not just this county, but all counties that are going to experience an additional cost.
Right.
So, all right, thank you.
Supervisor Natoli?
Yeah, Britt, just going on that slide back to the reduction in state and federal revenues. You mentioned in the adult protective services area having to make adjustments, $4.9 million, and obviously there are reductions that are contemplated in that. I trust that'll be covered later in
Yes.
some of the other presentations. But so how many years adjustment is that accounting for then? That 4.9 million, is that just a 1 year, or is that several years? Because if we're taking the hit this year, even though we're
Talking about the reduction in the Title 19? Right. Yeah, so that is just the fiscal year 1920 impact. You are correct. It is quite possible that as the state goes through its periodic audit process, we will be required to pay back prior year claims in the future.
So what does that bode in your analysis, certainly on the finance side of it, for adult protective services? That's been an area that took big hits during the recession. We have gradually, attempted to build that back, certainly by board action, by obviously leadership in our departments, and I think it reflects obviously a growing vulnerability of at-risk seniors in particular in our community, not just to neglect and abuse, but certainly financial crimes and such. And what I see, I think 5 or 6 positions this year in a couple of different categories that are going out, including public health nurses, and we can talk about that later. Then I guess I'm concerned if this claiming, to your point, if this isn't the end of it,
So
poses a big issue in my view.
So the $4.2 million reduction is basically a new base. That the level is the lower level because that is the appropriate claiming methodology that we're now using. In terms of prior year amounts owed, as you well know, as the board knows, we go through these audits for all these various programs that we get state and federal revenue. There are sometimes many years out from when they take into account areas where, in some cases, we found we have paid more than we should have. In some cases, we paid less. So it's premature to say exactly what that will mean. One of the reasons we set up the reserve for audit payback and litigation costs was to address these exact sorts of issues. As you know, a number of years ago, we had some significant issues, particularly on the mental health side and in some other areas. We've fixed a lot of those problems, so we're not seeing that, we think, as much as we had. But that's the reason we set up that reserve, which of necessity we propose spending down for, but not entirely eliminating. But in the long term, our hope would be at some point to rebuild up a reserve like that in order to address these sorts of issues.
Well, just let me ask the question a little more deeply, because when I see other reductions in public guardian, conservator, and then obviously in adult protective services, we don't have a larger contingent of folks. We have a growing population of elderly in this community, and I think the vulnerabilities have increased with housing costs, with I think families who are maybe in a dysfunctional mode in some cases. And so what we're doing, though, we would have built a base, not all on Title 19. I think we actually had some general fund dollars in here, if I'm not mistaken, and with the idea that we were going to provide a better safety net for seniors. And, they're not represented here this morning except for by the 5 of us and all of us that work on the budget. They're not, a lot of them are very vulnerable. They're, in their homes and maybe subject to neglect and abuse. And I guess I'm concerned that with what the picture has been painted already and not knowing what future years bring, and we have a reserve, that's good budgeting. But I think the policy framework for this is that, and we're working on a senior plan, but part of a senior plan would say to me that, you better have, you got to look at how strong a baseline service you have, and we're reducing that by what's included in the recommended budget. And so a reason I raise it is that we had general fund dollars, and again, it was certainly through recommendations that came through the exec's office and you and others in our Health and Human Services in the last couple of years, recognizing that growing need. Well, the need didn't stop because we've got these recommendations before us. In fact, I think it grows probably this very moment. And
I think when we get to child and family, Michelle and Bruce can address some of those concerns.
okay, but that's fine. But again, the dollars, I'm trying
Understood.
to parse those out. Yeah, because
Okay.
some of these are federal revenues
Right.
and some are on the general fund side, but the federal ones are in question, at least for this year, and that's a pretty big adjustment. Then behind that is what happens a year is out. We don't know. But the general fund piece of it is where we actually supplemented it and I think did some good work. And obviously we had some vacancies, and I get that. But
Supervisor, if I might, on this point, as Mr. Gill mentioned, we're going to be speaking more about this in Michelle Cajea's presentation. But as it relates to this time study issue, I just wanted to assure you that should the state raise any additional questions about this, and to my knowledge they haven't, we'll certainly work with them to ensure that whatever we have to do in the way of an adjustment minimizes any impact on the services that we provide. I can assure you of that.
Bruce, and I appreciate it. I guess what my concerns me most is that we are reducing the base. So the baseline from which we will start next year, irrespective of how good a work or what we try to do to soften the impact, is we will have reduced the base significantly from what it was last year to this year, and that's what we go into next year with. And so that to me is a key piece of the conversation here for today. Thanks.
I understand. As I indicated, the budget is balanced, and it's balanced by the use of general fund reserves and 43 million, basically 43 million in expenditure reductions, which are about 1.4% of the requested base expenditures. So, facing the need to make expenditure reductions, we went through a process where we asked departments, or we gave departments an initial net county cost target. That is a target of local discretionary revenue that they received, which was generally their fiscal year 18-19 adopted net county cost allocation. As part of their budget submittals, departments were asked to identify what reductions they would make to meet that target and what the impact of those reductions would be. Staff from the county executive's office reviewed department submittals, discussed them with the relevant department heads, often at great length, and based on those discussions and that analysis, recommended whether to accept the reductions identified by the departments, restore some or all of the reductions, or request additional reductions. In making our recommendations, we were guided by the following considerations. First, limit the impact on board priority programs or initiatives, and I'll talk more about that later. Second, avoid eliminating whole programs or services to the extent possible. Instead, make targeted reductions in various programs, and I think you'll see that throughout this budget message as we talk about how we spread those reductions across a variety of programs and services. Avoid backfilling reductions in federal, state, or other revenue. That's sort of a long-standing policy here. But while recognizing that there may be circumstances where backfilling or using net county cost to cover cost increases is warranted to avoid the negative consequences. And finally, to the extent possible, avoid employee layoffs. And in fact, the budget does not propose any layoffs. We were successful in that effort. The recommended budget, as I said, includes about $43.1 million in program reductions in 17 general fund budget units and reflects the elimination of 192.3 vacant positions. As I said, no layoffs are proposed. The reductions, amounts, and percentages of base expenditures vary depending on a variety of factors, including whether a department had revenue reductions or increases. All told, there are almost 100 specific reductions identified and described in detail in the budget document. I'm obviously not going to go through each reduction here, but I will highlight some of them both now and a little later when I talk about the status of the board's recent initiatives. The relevant department heads and I are, of course, available to answer any questions the board may have. This table's a little hard to see, but in the budget document, I think it's a little more clear. To begin then, the budget unit with the largest reduction is Human Assistance Administration, with a $16.5 million, 4.7% reduction in expenditures compared to the base, and the elimination of 93.5 positions, and that's due partly to a reduction in revenue. Ann Edwards, Director of the Department of Human Assistance, will be making a presentation this morning, as Mr. Gill said, so I won't say anything more about that budget unit at this time.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. So again, in the interest of making sure the public understands what they're seeing here with this table, if you just look at this table with no understanding of what has been mentioned in the last half hour, especially as it relates to our challenges with the lawsuit on the jail, the budget would, or the public would simply conclude that for some reason we're not interested in reductions for corrections, whereas we're completely interested in reductions for everything else. So it's a really, really important, not just a footnote, but a really bold descriptor here or explanation that that's what they're seeing with this table. So I'd like you to expand on that, please.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Supervisor Cerna, as your board is well aware. One of the things we did as we gave targeted net county cost allocations to the various departments was basically in terms of the corrections budgets, which are a portion of the sheriff's budget and correctional health services. We did not give them a targeted allocation. We basically said, we will fund your costs, whatever they are, because we knew we needed to not reduce their funding, but increase their funding, and that was one of the sort of premises we used in going into this, and that's why you could see in the sheriff's budget, we actually had to go in and take the sheriff's budget and split out the what we call fund centers, which are components of the budget that are related to corrections, from those that are related to all other services, where we did give them a net county cost target and did propose reductions.
Thank you.
On that particular one, I want to just make another point. I was going to wait till the end, but it's timely. And that's the consent decree that we have been negotiating with the litigants in the lawsuit, with the plaintiffs. It hasn't even been approved at this point. If we didn't go forward with a good faith effort in this budget to be consistent with the terms of that agreement, we're going to court.
Yeah.
And we go to court, the situation is going to be a lot worse next year than it is this year.
It definitely would. And so part of our effort here, both this year, fiscal year 18-19, and next year, as you rightly say, we don't yet have an agreed upon consent decree or approved consent decree, but part of our effort has been a good faith effort to demonstrate to the plaintiffs that we take seriously the issues that have been identified and are working to resolve those issues even in the absence of a legal of a court order to do so, because that court order would be significantly more onerous than what we would likely end up with in a negotiated settlement.
I agree. Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. Again, back to the settlement discussions. Again, we haven't finalized our discussions, and it was very clear to those of us that were in the mediation that the situation would be much worse, and it would also undermine our discussions with them about the investments we'd made so far. So they should, understand that we understand the depth of the problem and that we're going forward in good faith.
Exactly right.
Thank you.
The budget unit with the second largest reduction is Child, Family, and Adult Services, with a $7.7 million or 3.7% reduction in expenditures and the elimination of 55 positions, also due partly to reduction in revenue. Here too, the Department Director, Michelle Calles, will be making a presentation this morning. The recommended budget for the Probation Department includes a $5.5 million or 3.4% reduction in expenditures and the elimination of 14 positions, and that also is partly due to a reduction in revenue. This includes the elimination of 6 positions and not filling 5 additional positions as they become vacant in the juvenile hall, allowing for the eventual closure of 1 housing unit. The population of the hall has been declining, and this unit is no longer needed. Other probation reductions reflect the elimination of 6 positions and various contracts in the Title IV waiver program, which will reduce services aimed at keeping kids out of the foster care system, and the elimination or reduction of funding for various contracts for drug and alcohol treatment for probationers, which the department does not believe will have a significant impact on service delivery.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thanks. I apologize. I know you need to get through this, but again, for the audience, for the public that may be watching, when you say reductions, FTE reductions, I think it's better stated, you're talking about vacancies?
Correct.
Okay, that's an important distinction. Otherwise, the public's left with the impression that, 55 people that are currently employed are going to evaporate in child, protective services.
All the positions being eliminated are vacant positions. I'll repeat that, though, as I go through it.
Thank you.
The recommended budget for the District Attorney's Office includes a $4 million or 4% reduction in expenditures. This includes the elimination of funding for most extra help positions, including attorneys, criminal investigators, investigative assistants, and criminalists in the Forensic Crime Lab, and a reduction of overtime in the Forensic Crime Lab. This will likely result in operational delays. The budget also includes a $2.9 million increase in salary savings, which will be achieved by not filling positions as they become vacant. The recommended budget in the Sheriff's Office includes a $3.8 million reduction in expenditures. That's 0.7% of total base expenditures, but 1.1% of non-corrections base expenditures, and the elimination of 12 positions. We are not, as I said, recommending any reductions in the corrections portions of the Sheriff's budget for the reasons already discussed. The reductions on the non-correction side include the elimination of 5 deputy sheriff positions assigned to the 2 homeless outreach teams, or HOT teams, leaving 5 deputies and a sergeant in 1 team that will patrol a larger area, augmented by problem-oriented policing officers as they are available. As you know, we right now have 2 HOT teams, a north team, a south team, 5 deputies each, plus a sergeant overall. This will have 1 team that will patrol both areas. The budget also eliminates the arson task force, which is 1 sergeant and 2 deputy sheriff positions, vacant deputy sheriff positions, all these are vacant, and the shot spotter program, 4 deputy sheriff positions, and a contract for the shot spotter technology. With regard to that, I should note that the contract for the technology actually runs April through March. So we will have the technology through March of next year. The Sheriff's Department will keep it running. It will just mean there will not be dedicated deputies who will respond. There will be deputies who are on regular patrol who will respond as they can.
Thank you for that clarification. There was we had a meeting earlier this it was actually late last week with Under Sheriff Manis and also Councilmember Jay Chenier, since the shot spotter program is being deployed in an area that has a odd political geography between an unincorporated and incorporated city. And that was a question that I had about the distinction between the technology versus the personnel, but it's really important that that's pointed out, so I appreciate you mentioning it.
Right.
Supervisor Natoli.
Yep. Britt, and I don't know, maybe somebody can answer this a little later on. So back to the HOT team deployment, again, we spent a lot of hours in these chambers talking about the needs both on the Parkway, but certainly in our neighborhoods. And again, you did a very good job in the budget and outlining the initiatives, and you're touching on those as you're talking about reductions here. I guess I guess I'd like to know, beyond what you've described and what's been, in our briefings put out, that the POP teams would supplement the HOT teams, problem-oriented policing for the homeless outreach teams. But, deployment, it's a big county, a large unincorporated area, and many communities that I think are experiencing some of the impacts, but also the whole idea was to work with people in the community setting and to be accompanied by social workers and by others, both on the Parkway, but certainly in the neighborhoods, as we address issues that may affect businesses and residents. And so, and the POP teams have their hands full too. All of us certainly know that and value their work. So it may be that a little later in the presentation, someone from the Sheriff's Department could talk a little more about the detail of how that is going to work. Maybe it was going to work differently, obviously, and probably not have the same coverage. But I guess I would like to know before we make some decisions on the budget. Secondly, I want to ask about the arson task force, because oddly enough, when we had the hearing earlier this year on illegal fireworks and the enforcement thereof, we had people who were here from the arson task force, the Sheriff's Department, and now you're telling me those positions are vacant. And do we have retirements? Were people reassigned, or are they going to be reassigned? Is that how they're going to get to that?
Right. So basically, the sheriff has enough turnover and enough current vacancies, even if the vacancies are not directly in that unit, they will be able to deal with these reductions without any layoffs. I can tell you the explanation that we got from the Sheriff's Department about in terms of why it made sense for that reduction versus others, because no department wants generally to make reductions if they can avoid it. They all have service delivery impacts. Part of the logic there was, right now the Sheriff's Department works collaboratively with fire departments on the Metro Fire and so forth on these issues. They have investigators, and they felt that this was one area where the additional workload could be absorbed by the fire districts without necessarily a significant impact on services in the community. So that was part of the logic behind selecting the arson task force for reduction when they had to make reductions.
Okay, and so, and do I understand then that the fire departments, at least I guess the major departments, have show concurrence with that? Again,
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out.
be curious to know. Okay, thanks.
My understanding is they did, but we can follow
Okay,
up.
it'd be helpful to know. Thanks.
Okay.
Before you go on, I just wanted to say to Mr. Natoli, I've had a couple of arson cases in my district, and encouraged the Sheriff's Department to be involved in it, and was told by Metro Fire that thank you very much, but they handle the arson investigations. So I don't see that that's going to be a problem for them.
Okay.
The recommended budget for the Public Defender's Office includes a $1.5 million or 4% reduction in expenditures and the elimination of 2 positions. The positions being eliminated are an office assistant and an investigative assistant. In addition, the department would not fill certain positions as they become vacant, reduce services purchased from the Department of Technology, and delay the replacement of computers and software and certain training, along with various other reductions. The recommended budget for health services includes a $1 million or 0.2% reduction in expenditures and the elimination of 4.6 FTE positions, vacant positions, or excuse me, not all vacant right now, but those reductions include a $326,000 reduction in funding for the 4 emergency medical service positions that are responsible for inspecting and regulating ambulance service due to the loss of vehicle code fine revenue. The recommended funding level will provide 3 months worth of funding for the positions so that they would not be eliminated right away, to give health services time to bring proposals to sustain the program to the board before the budget is adopted in September. The department is working on a proposal, and they will be bringing that to you between now and September. And if that is approved, then we would avoid eliminating those positions or any reductions in that program. Other reductions include the elimination of funding for 1.3 vacant positions in the Women, Infants, and Children program due to a loss of state revenue. Deleting 1 senior therapist position in the California Children's Services Program, deleting $98,000 in funding for the HIV STD prevention and surveillance program, so the outreach efforts there due to a loss of grant revenue, and deleting 1 communication disease investigator in the tuberculosis program and a physician in the clinic. The recommended budget for animal care and regulation includes a $588,000 or 4.9% reduction in expenditures and the elimination of 2 positions. The main reason for the recommended expenditure reduction is an $860,000 reduction in departmental revenue, due primarily to the loss of the $924,000 contract for providing animal care services to the city of Elk Grove. As you know, the city is opening its new shelter. Typically, we would not recommend backfilling a loss of revenue from a contract, but in this case, we recommended some backfill, focusing particularly on maintaining a live release rate in the area of 90%. And with that in mind, so there's a list of other reductions that are in the budget. I won't go through them now because, as you're aware, subsequent to the budget actually being prepared, we received word from the city of Elk Grove that they would be interested in a short-term contract extension due to delays in the opening of their shelter. And there's a memo that was provided to all of you that outlines the situation there. What it looks like is, we don't know exactly how long they would need. It looks like somewhere between 1 and 2 months, but the way the agreement would be structured, if it goes any part of 1 month, we get the full month's payment. So 2 months worth of revenue would add an additional $182,000, and we've recommended adding back certain programs that would otherwise have been have been, or parts of programs that would otherwise been eliminated that are laid out in this memo.
Mr. Natoli.
As Britt paused, I just want to let know, folks that are in the audience, that there's a copy of the memo in the back, and also the contract extensions coming to the board next Tuesday.
Right.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you have copies for folks in the back, because I know there's a number of folks that I think have indicated some interest in speaking when appropriate later today as we get into public testimony. We'll still have an opportunity to talk about this. Obviously, I appreciate the late news, and the picture's improving, but there are still some things, obviously, that I think this member would like to talk about, but also others as well. But I think that's better news than when you had the recommended budget published a couple of weeks ago. So thanks for that work on that. But we'll hear from some folks on that. Could I just ask one other question? Going back to the in the children's services area, there was an elimination of one position in the WIC program, and if I recall correctly, and I was just looking through my notes here, I haven't found it yet, but that was a position that had about 75% match, that it was like $176,000 total, and that there was like $128,000 we were going to forego because we weren't going to put in the $44,000 match. So if someone could address, if I'm correct, I'm not sure that's the exact number there, but at some point in time today, without interrupting your presentation, Britt,
We'll get that for you.
Okay, I'd like to have some discussion about that, because that's one of those where we make a decision because we're making reductions, but the value of that versus what we get to help fund that program, and to know what exactly what that means to women, children, and families. So,
Got it.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. Just to be clear, Britt, on as it relates to the late breaking news with regards to Elk Grove and the request for 1 to 2 months of extended contract services in animal care, the staff has not made any determination, conclusion yet about how that would affect some of the concerns that have been expressed through multiple emails over the last 72 hours that I know every member of this board has been receiving. Is that something that's going to be addressed a little bit later?
So,
No, go ahead.
So we have not really been evaluating messages that have come in. What happened was, when we identified the additional money as being available, sat down with the department to identify what they believed would be the priorities for reduction, for restoration, and that's in the memo that you have before you.
I think if I could, Supervisor, and that's a good point. What our recommendation to the board is on community outreach programs, including the Batmobile. The budget current was $80,000. We're requesting the board to restore $20,000. On the cats spay neuter program for cats and community spay neuter, it's $110,000. We are recommending putting $62,000 back in that budget.
How much? I'm sorry.
62.
Thank you.
And then there is the feral cats program. There's a reduction of $70,000, and we're asking the board to restore the $70,000. So that comes up to $182,000. That's what we believe 2 months' worth will be.
Thank you.
The recommended financing transfers and reimbursements budget would sound sort of innocuous, but that is where we transfer money from the general fund to other funds. Includes a $400,000 reduction in expenditures. This is a $400,000 reduction in the amount of general fund resources transferred to the roads fund for overlay projects. With this reduction, $1 million will still be transferred to the roads fund. So in conclusion, these are only some of the recommended program reductions, and you'll have read about all of them in more detail in the budget. You'll also have read that despite these reductions, we believe that the budget maintains the county's capacity.
If I could just jump in, there's one more item that I wanted you to spotlight, which is a $500,000 cut in Healthy Partners.
Yes, yes.
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 There's two issues with that. One is late breaking news from the state budget on what the governor is proposing, and I have Bruce and Peter ready to address that on what we're going to do. And the other one is to explain $500,000 why that cut's there. So,
Yeah, I can talk about that. So,
And just in a sentence, let the public know what Healthy Partners is.
yeah, Healthy Partners is the program that provides health care to undocumented immigrants. And Part of that is primary care, and a part of that is specialty care. We have recommended, including in the budget, basically we reduced the specialty care budget by $500,000, still leaves over $1 million for specialty care. This year, about the Health Services Department is estimating they will spend about $1 million less than they had budgeted. So by reducing it by $500,000, we're still leaving basically $500,000 more than they spent this year, and they think that should be sufficient for fiscal year 1920.
That's for specialty care, not
For
primary.
specialty care,
Okay.
just for specialty care, yes.
And the governor's budget?
Yeah, what's
So
the-
on that note, Supervisor, we've been looking for details on how that's going to roll out. And as you know, any kind of statewide initiative, that's really where you have to watch to see how the department rolls it out. However, I'll say this, that as Dr. Beanlison and I have looked at this proposal, it doesn't frankly look to have that big of an impact on what we do with Healthy Partners. They've expanded Medi-Cal coverage up to the age of 25. Very initial estimate in our case is that would only be in the neighborhood of less than 100 people that might be affected in our program. Again, we have to see how they roll this out, what the full impact's going to be. But as it sits here today, and of course they're still talking about this in discussions at the state level as we speak, doesn't appear to have that big of an impact.
Okay.
And whatever impact we see, we'll come back in September if has an impact and we need adjustments or conversation.
Great. Supervisor Cerna.
Yeah, I just want to be clear here. So when we established the Healthy Partners Program, I think it was back in 2015, we started with an understanding that I believe there's about 43,000, 45,000 people, it's a rough estimate, in the county that we thought this program could help. But of course, because of resource constraints, we started initially with the program capped at 4,000 people, and it was also age capped at 64 years of age. We have since lifted the age cap, and I believe we've increased the number to 6,000 that we're serving.
No, 4,000 is the current cap.
4,000?
It was lower than that. I think it was like 3,000. We increased it to 4,000. Yeah.
So while we're debating what the state budget numbers or the state budget policy is on healthcare for undocumented folks, there still remains obviously a huge unmet need in terms of the total number of people that could benefit from the program. So if you have folks telling you that the $500,000 cut is somehow justified because there's not specialty care that's being taken advantage of, one could argue, I could argue all day long that the program is currently serving only a fraction of what it could or should be serving in the county, and taken as a whole, that $500,000 hypothetically could be used to actually serve more primary care to more people in the program. I just want to make that point.
And Supervisor, if I may add to your point just briefly, you're right about how we've been building up the coverage of that program. So we're going to be tracking the use of that account over the course of the year. We may have to have more discussions with you about that depending on how it's used, but that certainly is a priority area for the department.
Thank you, Bruce. My understanding, there's been a waiting list since this program's been initiated.
Yeah, and there's also been an active effort on that this year to expand participation in the program.
Great, thank you.
Supervisor Natoli.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're on health services, I had mentioned earlier about the WIC program, but you also addressed in your comments about the tuberculosis investigating position that's vacant, that's being eliminated. And there also was a reference to, and I know we had discussions of this in a couple different contexts before this board about, where this county and this at-risk population falls as it relates to sexually transmitted diseases. And we are very high in many categories, and we had received, I guess, some one-time funding to do some outreach and some work in that regard. And in my view, both tuberculosis, certainly, but with the STDs and, the rising rates and where it gets reported annually, that those are really frontline health issues. And what we're doing here, at least with the one reduction, is, again, adjusting the baseline that we've, have built back over the years, recognizing the growth in the number of cases with tuberculosis as well, and so I don't know if that's going to be covered by someone else, Britt, but I'd like to, again, have the opportunity to hear a little more about what that means in the context as we get into the presentation.
No, I think we can get Dr. Bielenson to talk about it.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, thanks.
You want to?
Supervisor, thank you about the STDs. We have the one program that was coming from the state that was cut. But as you are all well aware, thanks to your efforts of a few months ago, we now have an STD clinic, which we did not have. That was left untouched, as were our communicable disease investigators on the STD side, and one on the TB side was empty. That we did cut. But we do have an STD clinic actively operating at our primary care center.
So from a standpoint of service reduction, the clinic remains open, the staffing for that remains in place. This
Correct.
is the outreach. I mean, obviously you got to let people know you exist, and I guess we do that through multiple media.
Well, as you know, from the primary care center, we've now implemented a lot of new services, including Sacramento Covered, helping people get navigated to the appropriate places for services. And we buffed up our number of providers at our primary care center in general who are seeing STD patients and referring them to our clinic. So actually we have, compared to this same time last year, we have significantly more resources going towards STDs.
And then with regards to TB, obviously that's been something that over the years, for the years I've sat here, when we offered the clinic services, that always got offered up, or a lot of times got offered up, and we always maintained it because it's for the frontline public health. How many folks do we, with the elimination of the position, obviously it was funded, that goes away, so that's a new baseline to my point. Right. How many investigators do we retain? And I don't know if there's epidemiologists.
I believe we have 5 for the tuberculosis and additional ones for communicable disease. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll get back to you later.
Okay, if you could,
by the end of today.
And it might be helpful, again, this budget was pretty thorough, but in explaining a lot of things, but kind of where we are, what sort of, if it's too early to tell what the clinic, and then access to that, whether that's having any.
It would be too early to tell about our rates on STDs.
But with TB cases, we track those because, again, we know anyone can be exposed, and there's a whole investigative regime that goes behind that, and making sure people take their
directly
medications.
Observed therapy, correct.
So again, maybe just some information as to how many identified TB cases, what we're tracking, and what the caseload is for
I'll have that for you by noon.
Okay.
Also on the WIC thing, since you have me, we have a decreased caseload, and that's why the state is giving us less money, and that's true across the counties.
And which is that?
WIC, Women, Infant, and
Oh,
Children.
with WIC, that's
yes,
why.
It's a decreased caseload, and it's coming from the state.
Okay, so the state was actually they were actually reducing their 126,000
to counties around the state, not just Sacramento County.
Oh, okay, so it's going across the state. So okay, so the state money was going away. Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bielenson. Britt, get your scythe back out.
Catch your breath.
Can you lower that for him?
As I said, we believe the budget maintains the county's capacity to provide critical services to county residents while implementing strategic initiatives that address the board's priorities and expanding some services. In addition to the reductions that I mentioned, the recommended budget includes approximately $33 million in new or enhanced programs, what we refer to as growth. The general fund budget includes $24.3 million in growth funded with net county costs or realignment. Almost all of this represents what are essentially mandated expenditures, operating and capital investments in the jails in response to a lawsuit, costs associated with the Hardesty lawsuit against the county, and legislative mandated election costs. The remaining growth is funded by state, federal, or other dedicated revenue. Some of the more significant recommended growth includes the $21.7 million, including 68 new positions to make improvements in the county's jails that I've talked about. That includes $8.7 million in the sheriff's budget, $5 million in the correctional health services budget, and an $8 million transfer to the capital construction from the general fund financing transfers reimbursements budget. Among other things, this growth will fund the creation of 2 additional 20-bed intensive outpatient psychiatric units in the jails, including the first IOP for women inmates, additional physicians and other medical staff, and an additional 18 sheriff's records officers to continue the strategy of replacing deputies in control rooms so the deputies can be moved into the housing units, allowing more out-of-cell time for inmates. Let's see. Did I do this here right? Yeah. There's a $2.3 million in state and federal revenue to add 25 positions in child support services in a variety of areas to enhance the collection of child support payments. The child support services budget has been revenue constrained for many years. The governor's proposed state budget includes a significant increase in funding on an ongoing basis for child support programs in counties with the highest case-to-employee ratios, which include Sacramento County. Also, a $1.2 million use of Community Corrections Local Innovation Funds to add 7 positions in the probation department to establish a pretrial assessment and monitoring pilot program. The goal of the program is to identify detainees in the county jails who can be safely monitored in the community pending trial and to release them under conditions that will support their future appearance. This growth request also helps avoid layoffs in probation. We believe there is enough local innovation money available to support this program at this level for about 2 years. Our hope is that additional state money will become available by the end of this period, which it certainly will if SB 10 is upheld by the voters. That's the legislation currently subject to referendum that replaces cash bail with a system like our proposed pilot project. There are also various grant programs that are in the governor's budget that would also be available potentially to fund part of this program.
So Britt, let's also make the point that this program, as well as the potential grants coming down the road and other programs, very likely could, on the long term, decrease our obligations under the consent decree, financial obligations under the consent decree that we're entering into.
That's exactly right. I mean, one of the main things that would reduce what we have to spend in the jails is reducing the population of the jails significantly enough to be able to reassign existing staff versus adding new staff. And so anything we can do to safely release people into the community, the more we can potentially avoid having to spend what we would otherwise have to spend under the lawsuits.
Thank you.
And then there's a $3.5 million growth funded to add 29 positions in the airport department in a variety of areas to deal with the impact of increasing passenger and freight volume and address capital needs. As proposed, the budget continues funding for most priority programs and services that were initiated over the last 5 years with board approval. However, in some cases, the level of funding has been reduced. We've talked about some of those. Funding for one program has been eliminated. We've also mentioned that. Here's a brief update on the budget status of each of these initiatives. The board has approved several initiatives to address homelessness, such as providing rapid rehousing, providing the winter shelter program, improving family crisis response and shelters, preserving the Mather Community Campus, establishing a full-service rehousing shelter, and implementing a flexible, supportive rehousing program. The fiscal year 2019-20 recommended budget expands services in several areas using state and federal funding. The total budget for these initiatives is $20 million, a $7 million increase from the fiscal year 18-19 adopted budget level. There is a reduction of spending in one area, a $700,000 reduction in net county cost funding for rental subsidies. The remaining amount for this service is $2 million. For the current fiscal year, the contractor has been successful in placing families in federally funded housing slots, thus not needing the full amount. For fiscal year 19-20, additional state money, HEAP money, will allow shelter residents to potentially gain access to rental assistance through the flexible housing pool. As part of the enhancements this year, we will be increasing the number of shelter beds available by 40 from 75 to 115. The board has approved the parkways.
Excuse me, Britt, I'll jump in on that one. So, Mr. Gill, the $700,000 reduction, I mean, this is a very successful program. Are we going to continue to look at opportunities that may arise between now September and even after to backfill that and so that we don't impact the program negatively?
Yes, we are. We're going to continue monitoring what the governor's budget has in there, and our team's going to look at how to augment this money back in there.
Because we keep hearing that there's a whole bunch of money coming, and
Correct.
this may be an opportunity.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As your board is well aware, you approved the Parkways and Unincorporated Communities Cleanup and Safety Initiative to reduce the incidence and mitigate the impact of illegal camping in the American River and Dry Creek Parkways and in the county's unincorporated communities. The fiscal year 1920 recommended budget includes continued funding for this initiative, but at a reduced level. We already talked about the reduction in deputies assigned to the hot teams. The recommended budget also eliminates funding for the animal control officer, its vacant position, added to address issues associated with illegal camping in the parkways. The recommended budget includes funding for the continuation of efforts to reduce fire danger and illegal camping, increase debris removal, and generally enhance the visitor experience in the American River Parkway and the county's regional parks. The fiscal year 1920 recommended budget includes continued funding for cleanup activities, but reduces the hours for visitor services team seasonal staff that provides increased visibility in the parkway. These are not people who do cleanup. These are people who are out there being seen and sort of keeping an eye on things. We reduced that by half, from 9,000 hours a year to 4,654 hours a year. The recommended budget includes funding for the implementation of community livability initiatives, such as the increased code enforcement activities that were approved over the last few years, and graffiti abatement activities, the enhanced 311 call program for residents to bring livability concerns to the county's attention, and the community prosecution unit in the district attorney's office. There are no reductions in the community prosecution unit or the 311 call program. The recommended budget includes continued funding for the intelligence-led policing model that was implemented a number of years ago by the Sheriff's Office. The recommended budget includes funding for the behavioral health services enhancements to provide appropriate services to persons with serious drug and alcohol problems, reduce reliance on hospital emergency rooms, and ensure that individuals experiencing a mental health crisis receive the best treatment possible in the most appropriate setting for their needs. The recommended budget includes funding for the implementation of the 3-year MHSA plan to expedite services for individuals with serious mental illness and/or co-occurring substance abuse disorders and are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, including persons being served by the county's various homeless initiatives and the City of Sacramento's Whole Person Care Program. The Healthy Partners Program provides healthcare services to undocumented immigrants. We've already talked about that. Funding for the Healthy Partners Program continues at the same level in fiscal year 1920, except for the reduction to the specialty care. The amount budgeted for continued funding for specialty care is $1.76 million. The recommended budget includes funding for the continued implementation of a strategic plan to reduce disproportionate African American child deaths through community-based contracts and targeted staffing in child protective services, public health and probation. That's the Black Child Legacy Campaign. There's no changes or reductions to that program. The recommended budget includes funding for the implementation of the Title IV foster care waiver pilot program, providing child protective services and probation with federal funding and flexibility to reduce costs and improve outcomes for foster care youth over a 5-year period. For the most part, funding is continued at the same level for this program in the fiscal year 1920 recommended budget. I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. There is one reduction, as I mentioned earlier, in probation, reduction of 6 positions, $1.2 million reduction in Title IV waiver revenue. The recommended budget includes funding for the implementation of a new adult supervision model in probation that has prioritized supervision and services for all high-risk probationers in the first 6 months of the year with a view to reducing offender recidivism. And the recommended budget includes funding for the implementation of initiatives that focus on improving animal care and maintaining the animal shelter's 90% live release rate. As mentioned, the recommended budget included reduction expenditures in a number of those areas, some of which we've now proposed to restore, but there are still some reductions in some of those programs. But given the funding level that is recommended, the department expects to be able to maintain a live release rate of 90%. I already mentioned the recommended budget reflects the termination of one of the board initiatives, and that's the Shot Spotter program. The recommended budget includes an operating contingency of $986,000, a $1 million reduction from the fiscal year 18-19 adopted level. This represents approximately 0.4% of the budgeted general fund expenditures. The general fund budget is balanced with $108.6 million in one-time resources, a slight increase over the amount of one-time resources used to balance the fiscal year 18-19 budget. This includes $422,000 in one-time discretionary revenue, $75 million in available fund balance carryover, a $5.7 million increase from the prior year. We always have some fund balance carryover, but the amount can change significantly from year to year. $75 million is the highest the general fund available fund balance carryover has been in over 10 years. The budget is also balanced by the cancellation of $12.4 million in general fund reserves, including, as I said, the $324,000 technology upgrade reserve, $3 million of the audit report payback future litigation settlement cost reserve, and $9 million of general reserves. With these cancellations, general reserves will stand at $12.1 million, and the audit report payback future litigation settlement cost reserve will stand at $2.1 million. There's also $20.7 million in fund balance carry forward in the realignment restricted funds that are used to help balance the budget. This reflects the cancellation of approximately $14 million in realignment fund reserves, primarily in social services and community corrections. With these cancellations, almost all realignment fund reserves will be eliminated. The recommended budget includes the repayment of $6.7 million of the $77.65 million in interfund transfers from other funds made to the general fund in fiscal years 2008-09 through 2010-11. This is consistent with the plan we presented to the board in fiscal year 2017-18 to repay the amount owed by fiscal year 2022-23. At the end of this fiscal year, the outstanding balance owed will be $26.75 million. With the repayment included in the fiscal year 19-20 budget, the balance owed at the end of fiscal year 2019-20 will stand at approximately $20 million.
Supervisor Natoli.
Yes. Just on that, and thank you, Britt, and thanks, Nav, for pointing that out. I think it certainly goes to the recession of 10 years ago and interfund borrowing that we did in order to preserve programs and services at that point in time, decisions that were made as we were in a real downward spiral, and avoided some serious reductions and layoffs, at least for a year and a half. While we did this, and I think this maintains the commitment that we borrowed it and we're paying it back. My question is that the $26.75 million that would be outstanding, is that owed to one fund? Is it still the workers' compensation?
It's owed to two funds. It's owed to the workers' compensation fund and the clerk recorder fee fund.
Okay, and is that evenly split, or what's
No, it's not evenly split. There's more, I'd have to check, there's more owed to one than the other.
It's more to the workers' comp and a little bit less to the clerk recorder.
Okay, and again, I think this maintains the commitment, and obviously as budgets tighten, and we know with this board, set policy direction, not knowing that in 2019-20 we were going to be looking at some of the things we're looking at this very moment. I guess my question will go to that. Again, we've made good on this, but in the event that we only made a $6 million payment. Obviously, we still have outstanding amount that we owe to ourselves, and I don't think either one of those two particular funds is short. We want to maintain the commitment, obviously, for our credit rating and so forth. But how was it at 6.7? Was that the set amount, or is that a proportion?
So this was an amount that was in the plan that we presented and that we've shared, for example, with the rating agencies.
Yeah.
I think this is seen, frankly, as a test of the county's, by them, as a test of the county's commitment to meeting its debt obligations. And I think our feeling is that to not pay this amount could significantly impact our bond rating, coming up at a time when we're likely to have to issue debt, whether it's for new jail issues or potentially related to the settlement of the Hardesty lawsuit. So I think this number, while it was basically whatever it took to pay it back in equal installments over 6 years, it is publicly known. It's known by the rated agencies, and we believe that it would be dangerous to not stick to that commitment.
There's two components to rating agencies, actually three, that they have given us feedback. One is the amount that we have in fund balance compared to everybody else. And there's a slide coming up, and I think Supervisor Sir and I asked last year for us to kind of canvass the whole state. and not steal Britt's thunder, but we are one of the lowest on that.
Right, we saw, I saw the chart in the budget.
And that continues to be a bone of contention with them that we have, and we are dipping into our reserve for all the reasons we listed.
Right.
This is a piece that actually is more problematic for us to explain to them. And I think Supervisor Natoli and Supervisor Peters will remember this when the $77.65 million was taken. There was a commitment made at that point that we'll pay it back in 3 years. And we never did. And
We
then
weren't
there's-
even out of recession in 3 years.
Understood.
No, I know.
But
Yeah.
that's what was, commitment was made, and that was relayed on to rating agencies. And you remember at that point when we were making that commitment, we had, our bond rating was going down substantially, and we had $450 million in variable pension obligation bonds that we were only one downgrade from those being called on us. And it took a lot of effort for us to convince the rating agencies we're still in a recession, we have critical services. And when it started coming back, we were not putting the money back in at the level that they were expecting for those bonds not to get called. So in working with them, this is a number that they really are watching pretty closely on our rating side. And the reason I bring that up as a caution is two-pronged. One is we still have about $120 million in variable rate debt that if our ratings slide more, it could get called. I'm not saying it is, but it could. And the second one is just a concern that you've heard throughout this morning, is that when we go back to the bond market and have to borrow money, is how much interest rate are we going to pay? So this is one piece that they will look for.
If I could just quickly, but that isn't both of those are internal funds. I don't, and are they required by law as it relates to the workers' compensation? I think it's like a trust fund that, again, for what we anticipate would be exposure.
Yeah, so we've looked at that on almost every other year. We look into that. We collected that for a reason. So we not only collected from general fund, we collected from state and federal money, we collected from enterprise funds, and that was based on what the experience was going to be on those funds. So the conclusion we've come is that there's a reason why we had them in there. Same thing went for smaller amount on the clerk recorder, but the workers' comp is the one that we owe bulk of this money back to.
And has our experience rating improved as it relates to that? Is there an actuarial that could be done that could adjust that so that the sum total amount years out would be different than what we anticipated back in 2009, 10 when we borrowed money?
Actually, it's made it a little bit worse, some of our claim. And our funding level is at a high teen, and it might be at 2021.
Yeah, right.
And it's pretty low. And our cash level is pretty low on that too. So we work with our actuarials to let them know that there is a payback. We'll pay it back in 4 or 5 years. I'm not suggesting that we're going to get to the spot where the actuarial wants us to be. We're not going to hit 60, 70%. It's just not going to happen. But that's where this money is going back to help with that experience, help with the cash flow on it.
Okay, thanks.
So every year we report to you on the status of our transient occupancy tax revenue. This year, the budget for 1920, the budget includes $6.8 million in TOT revenue, which is just slightly more than the amount in the fiscal year 1819 adopted budget. The recommended use of funds is essentially unchanged from fiscal year 1819, including funding for legacy organizations, which are like the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Center for Sacramento History, the $1 million community grant program that your board has approved, the board district funds, the support for the property and business improvement districts, support for economic development programs, and then general support for all county programs through the use of net county cost. So this is the chart that Mr. Gill was referring to. It's titled Large County Discretionary Reserves, and of course discretionary reserves are our savings account. They provide a hedge against economic downturns, unanticipated cost increases. They are critical if we ever need to issue debt, as Mr. Gill said. This table shows the discretionary or unrestricted fund balance as a percent of revenue for Sacramento County and the 11 counties we typically compare ourselves to at the end, as of the end of fiscal year 1780, which is the last year that there were audits prepared, CAFRs prepared for all of the various counties. This represents the available fund balance, what we call the available fund balance carryover, and discretionary reserves. That is the portion of the fund balance that the board has control over. Of course, each county is unique in terms of fiscal situation. Some, like us, have large unincorporated populations. Some run county hospitals, and we all have different property tax bases. Nevertheless, there are some things we can conclude from this chart and from other information that we have available. The first is some good news. Although this isn't shown in this table, our unrestricted balance increased from $37.6 million at the end of fiscal year 2016-17 to $76.2 million at the end of fiscal year 2017-18. And that was noticed by the rating agencies and seen as a positive thing, particularly since, as you well know, prior to fiscal year 15-16, the balance had actually been negative since 2010. Our unrestricted balance as a percent of revenue increased from 1.6% at the end of fiscal year 2016-17 to 3.32% at the end of fiscal year 17-18. And then, unfortunately, some bad news. Our unrestricted balance is only 3.32% of revenue, which is significantly lower than all of our comparable counties, as you can see from this table. The next closest county to us is Riverside, with an unrestricted balance that is 9.07% of revenue, almost 3 times our level. With the exception of Riverside and Orange, which has an unrestricted balance of 13.4% of revenue, all of our comparable counties have unrestricted balances that are at least 20% of revenue. The average unrestricted balance among our comparable counties is 31.3% of revenue. Our unrestricted balance is also significantly lower than most experts suggest as a best practice. For example, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends that cities and counties maintain an unrestricted general fund balance of at least 2 months, or 16.6% of revenue. If our general fund unrestricted balance met that standard at the end of fiscal year 2017-18, that balance would have been $391.6 million rather than $76.2 million. And finally, of necessity, the fiscal year 19-20 recommended budget proposes to cancel reserves and spend down the restricted balance. Mr. Gill mentioned the request that Supervisor Cerna made to look at beyond our group of 12 counties, at all of the counties in the state. There are 3 counties that don't actually post the CAFR. And so those aside, we have the lowest unrestricted balance of any county in the state as a percent of revenue. Not obviously in absolute dollars, but as a
Well, they can't accuse us of sitting on money, that's for certain.
Yeah, that is certainly true.
I don't think we'll be saying that to the rating agencies.
Yeah.
If they're watching, disregard that part.
Yeah, we just know how to have a budget and call it close. I don't know.
The recommended budget is based on certain assumptions, some of which may not come to pass, and we know that in future years we will have to deal with cost and resource issues that could negatively impact our fiscal situation. Areas of concern include the potential expiration of the Title IV foster care waiver. That waiver is currently scheduled to end on September 30th, 2019, and absent action by Congress and the President, it will not be continued. Although there are efforts in Congress to extend the waiver for 2 years, there's been a bill introduced, for example, by Senators Feinstein and Rubio that it would extend it for 2 years. It is looking, unfortunately, increasingly unlikely that these efforts will be successful. There are also discussions in Washington and the state legislature about providing short-term assistance to states or counties participating in the waiver that would phase in the impact of revenue reductions resulting from the end of the waiver. At this point, it's unclear what the outcome will be from those discussions. When the county entered into the waiver, the board approved spending approximately $13 million of waiver revenue on new programs in child protective services and probation. These programs are focused on efforts to reduce foster care caseloads and keep foster care kids out of institutions. From the evidence available, it appears these efforts have been successful. The county's foster care caseloads and commitments to institutions have declined since the waiver began. In addition, because the county had been overmatching our Title IV foster care revenue, maintenance of effort requirement, we were able to spend the remaining $16 million on existing waiver-eligible expenditures, thus freeing up net county cost and realignment, which have been reallocated to fund other programs and services, including funding for new and enhanced programs in a number of critical areas throughout the county. The county's fiscal year 1920 budget includes approximately $29 million in Title IV foster care waiver revenue. If the waiver ends without any federal or state relief, the county will experience a $21 million revenue reduction in fiscal year 2019-20 and another $8 million reduction in fiscal year 2021. This will likely require further program reductions when the board considers the budget recommended for adoption in September or potentially in future years. The jail lawsuits have already been mentioned. As we talked about, in addition to the $21 million in this year's budget, we'll be looking at the need to make investments in future years. We talked about the Hardesty Schneider lawsuit. There's the $1 million in this year for a surety bond. The current judgment against the county is approximately $105 million. And depending on the outcome of this case, the county could have to pay up to this amount plus attorney's fees. We've only got $2 million in the litigation reserve, audit payback reserve. So any costs beyond that would likely have to be funded through over time, either directly paying over time if we're allowed to do that, or through issue some sort of bonds to allow us to pay it over time at a cost in the area of about $10 million, at least at $105 million, about $10 million a year, depending on what the amount was. It could be more or less than that.
Excuse me, Britt. Supervisor Frost.
Britt, on the Title 4E, is that are we gonna know in September? Will that go down in September? And
So we don't know. We're still working on this. Bruce Wagstaff has been very active in these efforts, and he can maybe talk more about it. But I think the bottom line is we're not sure whether we will, in fact, know by September.
A couple of points on that, Supervisor. In terms of the congressional activity, there is a number of things underway, but I agree with Britt, you really can't say for sure that it's going to produce anything positive. However, what happens is that there's discussion on both sides of Congress about providing some form of relief, but as you know, they don't tend to actually get down and do something till they're very near the end of their session, which would be past our budget hearing discussions. However, I'm hoping that we'll have a better indication of whether or not we're going to be successful in that by then. We can see how the momentum's going. At the state level, there is discussion. We've met with Senator Pan's office to try to get some relief. That we should know certainly before your September budget hearings. For example, there's discussion underway about possible relief in a budget trailer bill that might be drafted over the next couple of weeks. So. Long answer, I'm sorry. On the congressional side, we probably won't know, but perhaps we'll know something on the state side.
So the point on the congressional side is the federal budget year starts October 1, and typically they negotiate all the way to that date. So I think our contingency plan is if we hear something, of course, in our September budget, we'll bring what we have, but otherwise there is a potential, depending on what happens, if we have reductions, they'll be back in session sometime right after Congress makes its decision.
there's a lot of important programs that kind of depend on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has implications not only financially, Supervisor, but certainly programmatically. Absolutely. That's why we're pushing so hard to try to get some extension here.
Thank you.
And I've already mentioned the one-time resources in the budget, which will, for the most part, not likely be replicated in fiscal year 2021 and beyond. So the bottom line on that is, given these factors, it's likely there will need to make program expenditure reductions in the coming years beyond what we proposed this year. Conclusion, the budget is balanced. There's $43 million in general fund program reductions in order to balance. The recommended budget includes limited, new, or enhanced programs, all either revenue supported or essentially required to meet mandates of one kind or another. And given the budget uncertainties, additional program reductions will likely be needed. Here's the recommended actions.
Supervisor Cerna?
I was going to say before I'd like to note that Chief Deputy Sheriff Phil Brelge, who oversees field services, is here to respond to the question that was asked about the hot team reductions. If you'd like to hear from him now.
Sure.
I had a question on something.
Yeah, I had a question.
Okay, let's go through this, and then if that comes up and Supervisor Cerna wants to, then we'll do it then.
So, thank you. So, what wasn't mentioned, I don't think, unless it was part of the brief mention of legacy programs, which I'm not sure it is. It came to my attention, and may have come to the attention of other board members in the last few weeks, of a cut to, I guess it's through CPS, to weave women escaping a violent environment. It's $150,000 for their children's program that's administered through their Safe House. And my understanding is that because I saw the letter from Michelle KS that the funding was not being recommended at the time, I've been in discussions with the county executive over the last 48 hours. I'd like him to respond to see if we've made any headway to restore that funding.
So we were going to address that when Michelle got in there, but we can Bruce, you want to start now?
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor. Yeah, this has been an area we have been looking at very closely over the last several days. And as I think you probably know, and as you just mentioned, what the proposed reduction for WEAVE is in DCFAS's budget. This relates to the WEAVE Safe House, as you just mentioned. It's worth noting for the board that there is, because of the importance of WEAVE and domestic violence work that we do, the budget still contains a number of other funding sources for WEAVE.
This is a specific contract, right?
That's a specific contract, that's correct, but there are other contracts for WEAVE. For example, in DHA, they've got a contract for over $200,000.
And I appreciate that, Bruce,
Yeah.
but this is specific to that contract.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And so there's been, but recognizing how much is still in the budget for WEAVE, we've had to take that into account. There has been some discussion in most recent days about the possibility of some bridge funding for WEAVE, because there was the indication, again, I haven't talked to Beth directly about this, but I had heard that there was the possibility of some fundraising. How about some bridge funding? We've discussed that and find that to be a workable discussion. The number that we've heard is $75,000 for that purpose. And that, to us, is a workable way to approach this. But in terms of the larger amount, I just wanted to point out to the board our recognition of the importance of WEAVE. And you'll find in the budget for different, albeit different reasons and different purposes, there's over $600,000 in the budget for WEAVE. And I can break that down.
I get that. I'm looking at it from the standpoint, quite frankly, of regardless of the other contracts we may have with WEAVE for the great work that they do across the entire county and through the region, that this is a particular service that is very unique. It's providing school services at the Safe House, so kids that are suffering crisis in the course of a domestic violence incident where their mother is seeking refuge has uninterrupted access to their education resources. It's providing counseling. You can imagine that kids that have to go through something like that are experiencing a significant amount of trauma. Preview of coming attractions, while I appreciate the fact that staff has talked about bridge funding, I think from the standpoint of the import of this program and what it does, it's $150,000. We're talking about a $4.4 billion all funds budget. We're talking about a general fund that's measured in the billions. So to me, I think this is an important enough service that regardless of all the other contracts, for all the other great work they're doing, this is one that I want to see fully restored.
Supervisor Natoli.
Yes, certainly interested to hear from the sheriff in a moment, but I wanted to ask Britt, kind of back to, it was embedded in a lot of the presentation. I think, by the way, thank you, Britt. I know that was a lot of preparation to put together for this morning. In the correctional health services, obviously the supplemental and all the information you provided this morning, I think it's important to point out, I want to make sure it's very clearly understood that for this year, with the additional recommended amounts, that we're looking at about $53,700,000, of which the net county cost is about $47 million. Is that correct? And the net county cost,
seems right. I would have to confirm that, but that sounds right.
That sounds about right.
and if so, of the net county cost, how much of that is general fund, and then the other is realignment, so it has flexibility for other health services, but it's being dedicated to the correctional health. So can you tell me what the breakdown is there, roughly? The split between general fund and realignment, or if there's
The net county cost is all general fund. Realignment would be separate from that.
Okay, so all the net county costs in correctional health for the jail population is entirely general fund.
Net county cost is all general, it's all discretionary resources, yes.
Okay.
That's what it is.
And I guess there was I would just point out there a note in the budget material, so it's out there, but I think it goes to this task force that's going to look at how you can reduce incarcerations and working with, the both certainly with the courts, but also with obviously the sheriff and our DA and public defender and others that are involved. But when it comes to correctional health, there's a footnote, a bullet point in here, and I'm going to read it because I think it goes to the necessity to take a look at that. Certainly the criminal behavior by which they end up being sentenced in some cases now, because we're now we talk about county jails, but we're now a prison. That you point out here on page I-66 that pharmaceutical drugs expenditures went up due to increasing drug prices. The annual cost of drugs to treat an patient with rare hemophilia disease is $1.3 million. $1.3 million a year for one inmate. The inmate has no anticipated release date. And when we're talking about, and I contrast that because when we talk about, whether it's $500,000 for Healthy Partners, or it's $300,000 for this health program, or for for public health services, that's a lot of money. Again, that person is our care and custody. I get it, but I think it speaks to the broader issue here that one, what power we have to contain costs, certainly to provide for humane treatment that provides the medical services behind that. And then in that same bullet point here in the budget says the cost of psychotropic drugs is expected to increase by 15% during fiscal year, well, it says 18-19, so I assume that's supposed to be 19-20. I don't know. It says 18-19. Maybe that's what chewing up. But again, that's one example. And so that money, the $47 million, would be available to the remaining portion of folks who aren't incarcerated in this county, whatever their age, whatever their walk in life, would be available for services. And so we are dedicating, in addition to the incarceration costs and anything else, $1.3 million. That is the type of situation, again, I have no idea, this is not personalizing, but it talks about an inmate. That is the situation that I think that, certainly us on this side, but the courts, the sheriff, and whoever else is involved needs to take a look at, because all it takes is a few of those, and anybody can do the math. And, and that may be the extreme example, so I'm not trying to, be exaggerative here at all. I'm just reading from this document. And I think it points out to, I think, the cost, no matter what we do to contain costs, we only have so much control over that. And in fact, in some cases, have very little control over that. And that's the contrast, that is the backdrop for me when I ask questions today in my considerations for what we do, recognizing obviously this is a very serious matter. But the seriousness is certainly embedded in what it means to the ability for us to deliver programs and services to meet all those obligations we've talked about, and you've done a tremendous job in outlining that. But again, I don't know about that case, but I assume there are others that may not be as extreme. But nonetheless, those are significant costs. And, we're talking about 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, human beings who obviously are in our care and custody. But when I think about the 10s and the 20s and the tens of thousands of folks who go without services, that for me is a balance as an elected representative in this county. And so I put that out there because as I've thought about this year's budget and all the presentation you've made here today, that is really deeply embedded in my mind that, that those costs that are borne solely by the people of this county. This isn't the state coming in to help us. This isn't the federal government subventions as we talk about these silos. These are county taxpayer dollars that could be used for any number of ways, and people might argue this is the highest priority for the use of those funds. But I believe health care for people, whatever their walk in life, whatever their age, and whether they be a senior, they be a child, they be someone who has a disability, has a health challenge, those are critical issues. And because we direct so much money to that source, it takes away. We have roughly 4,000 people, not a static population, that are incarcerated in our jails, prisons, and the costs are just, as compared against what we're able then to do for the general population, it's really out of scale. And I say that because I know what direction we're going in here, and that's, that's the direction we're going. But this, to me, is a case. I don't know, Britt, if there's been any conversation. I guess beyond making a statement, how do we get a focus on these situations and recognizing that the people are sentenced there, so that's a matter of the judicial system and due process. But when we, the county taxpayers, are bearing those kind of costs, what's done? I mean, is there any relief? There's no relief because, again, they're solely ours. So I guess I'm curious.
So what I would say is there are really two different components to this.
Okay.
The first is sort of how do we operate the services that we provide in the jail, recognizing that once someone is in the jail, they are entitled, as we found through this lawsuit process, to certain standards of care, whether it's out of cell time or mental health services or medical services. So there's no avoiding that obligation once they're in the jail. There are obviously different ways to operate jails. There's ways to operate them more efficiently, less efficiently, and that's an issue that we are continuing to look at, working with the Department of Health Services in the case of Correctional Health Services, to look at ways to provide services as efficiently as possible. The other aspect of it is essentially how many and who is in the jail. And as you rightly point out, that is not entirely within our control. There are certain things that we can, and we've been trying to do, working with the sheriff, working with the district attorney, working with the courts, working with the public defender, to find ways, both pretrial, for example, the pilot program that probation has put together, and looking at potential alternatives to incarceration on the sentence side to try and impact the overall population of the jail, which does drive, obviously, what the costs are. But we're dealing with a situation where I think it's fair to say, partly because of realignment and partly just because of national trends with regard to not just in California, but throughout the country, about people with mental health issues in jails, with deinstitutionalization. Jails have become, in some ways, de facto mental health institutions. There's a whole variety of issues that are going on there that we are sort of forced to deal with. Again, we are looking at ways to do things more efficiently. There's a serious effort underway to do that, and we are trying to look at ways to find alternatives to incarceration. But neither of those are necessarily easy or simple. But absent that, once someone is in our custody, we have a constitutional obligation to provide them a certain level of care and service, and it's an entitlement just like any of the other entitlements, essentially, programs we provide. So I think we are working along both those routes. You won't get any argument from us that it's expensive to operate a jail. It is very expensive to operate a jail. It's certainly one of the most expensive things counties do. It's one of the core functions of counties, but it's one of the most expensive things we do, and we are looking to address both of those issues.
I would just say but unlike most entitlements, not all, but most, there are federal or state, either some subventions or some spreading of the costs. Either the people of the United States of America or the people of the state of California, share in that burden as part of the societal obligation. Here, this county and other counties, we're not the exception by any means, bear that cost solely. And when you look at healthcare costs, and certainly the direction this nation has gone, and in the state, part of the conversation needs to be, how do you put it on local taxpayers and residents to bear all the costs for the incarcerated population? They're not the ones that did anything wrong. They're not in jail. And so why is it that we have to bear that? And I think legislatively, I've said this in years past, that we need to join with others, and it may be just, barking in the wind, but I think that we need to press the point that we take the obligation seriously. We're going to do what we need to do to meet the constitutional framework for health care, but that to continue to put that on the backs of the local taxpayers versus spreading statewide, and the state did this when they made us a prison. I mean, we always had responsibility when folks were jailed, but they weren't there for 5, 10, 15 years. And they weren't, and as people age in place and they come in with health issues, it's our responsibility to take care of them. But the picture has changed, and I think we need to advocate as a leading county and a county that's in the front yard of the state capitol to take that message to the legislature and to the governor of the state of California and say, this is a burden that is draining the ability for us to provide for services for the entirety of our population. And it's a contrast. And I guess I would just say, maybe we've already said that. Maybe we do it through our County Executive Association, through CSAC and other organizations. But I think that we need to join with others and say, you need to help share in this, because you change the sentencing regime. We abide by the law, and folks are sentenced under the courts in due process. Again, I say that because that is the backdrop by which we are considering this budget, and in future years will continue to be, I think, the backdrop. And I think we need to do everything we can within our power to advocate for changes that would at least help share that burden.
So Supervisor Natoli, point well taken. That is an advocacy we have taken and will continue to. We are working with other counties that are in a similar situation. We're not unique.
Right.
As you know, there's 15 other counties that are facing this, and I think it's going to continue with the other counties too. The previous administration had a very different take on what responsibilities the county should have. We're going to work with the current administration to see if there's a relief that can come in. But as you pointed out, we are getting prisoners that were not county prisoners. So the whole nature has changed, and the rules that we operate our jail are changing on us. And that's the work that we're doing. But your frustration, we feel it too, and the other counties feel it too. And it is a lot of money we are spending on a population that we didn't have a couple years ago. So that is a change, but we will continue to advocate and continue to push this issue.
If I could, Mr. Just one other thing to that point now, and I know we've talked about this in the past, and it wouldn't apply to all the folks within there, but certainly to a segment of them. Even the extension of Medi-Cal would, would there be some shared responsibility? That would, and again, how that would work, I don't know, but something to that effect, where there's some sharing. But right now, as soon as they cross the threshold, forever how long they're there, we bear all the costs. And so I just think there may be some other ways to draw the equation.
Yeah, we will continue to lobby on that.
What I will say is that one of the changes that came about with the Affordable Care Act and the extension of Medicaid is that although it is still not legal to spend federal Medicaid dollars in correctional institutions, when we take people out of those institutions into hospitals and they stay for more than a day, they become Medi-Cal eligible, Medicaid eligible. And so we have actually, despite what you see as the increase in costs compared to what that increase would have been, we have taken advantage of that and actually have seen significant savings in what our costs would have been using that mechanism when we do take them out. Now, obviously, there's other costs. You have to have staff take them and all sorts of things. But that has actually been one positive thing in all of this that we've been able to utilize.
Well, then on that note, to have any information you might be able to share with us, what offset there's been, that would be important. That's part of if you're going to be factual. If I'm going to be factual about the message, then I would like to know that.
No, I think we'll work with you and with the whole board if we have other information on it. We could do that.
As Supervisor Natoli, I'll also let you know that in the last 24 hours we have been made aware that the governor's office is interested in touring our jail. I think that's extremely important so that they see up close and personal what some of the decisions that have been made in the past at the state level, what they mean to locals. So, there is some outreach that's coming from the other side as well.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Supervisor Frost.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Brelji to, sorry.
No, Supervisor Frost.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do have some questions for the chief, but I had some other comments as well. I wanted to comment regarding weave. I felt the same concerns as Supervisor Cerna in that, they had not a lot of notice, and it is an important program, and if there were solutions with bridge funding that would help them kind of get through this, I would support that. I wanted to ask a couple questions regarding HOT and the probation pre-trial assessment. I'll start with probation. I think that's exciting. My question is, does this project with the pre-trial assessment involve DA and the judges and multiple departments? And will there be some data, will we be able to retrieve data from these pilots, the pilot program, that will help us understand how these people, whether or not they show up for trial, I guess is the bottom line in my mind.
We will, and I'll let Chief Seal address that.
Hi, Chief. And then the other question I have relates to, is this just for low income, or is this based on people that are just within a certain qualification that qualify to be in this program?
Good morning, Lee Seal, Chief Probation Officer. Pleasure to be here. If I recall your questions in order, let me.
Sorry.
I'm pleased to be talking about it. I think it is an exciting project. To answer your first question, yes, we are in close consultation with the District Attorney's Office, the Public Defender's Office, obviously the courts, and other system partners as we go forward with this project. It's been in the works, some level of planning for some time now, because we were anticipating the implementation of Senate Bill 10. As you may recall, when I reported last on this subject, that of course is, as Mr. Ferguson reported, is currently on hold pending before the voters in November 2020. But in the meantime, that doesn't stop us from still moving forward with our own pretrial project, which is what we're excited to do if the board supports it. As a number of counties such as San Joaquin and others throughout the state have done. So that's what we're proposing to do. I will add also that doing so puts us in a very strong competitive position to apply for state funding that we believe there's a $75 million that by all intents and purposes appears that it's going to be approved in the state budget. We'll know, of course, for sure in a matter of days, hopefully. But there's bipartisan support, and the governor supports it. In fact, the judiciary supports it. Those are going to be in the form of competitive grants. And in anticipation of those grants, the Judicial Council has already proffered some guidelines for the competitive process, and one of the things that they're really looking for is shovel readiness. So by getting kind of a jump start in the way we hope to do, we put ourselves in a very competitive position to draw down that state funding. To your question about data, yes, we will be collecting and reporting data as part of this project.
And so anyone can potentially qualify. It's not based on an income, just income. It's an overall assessment that you do.
Right. What we look at is risk. There are two things that we focus on when we look at pretrial decisions. One is their risk of not coming back to court. We want to make sure and do everything we can to ensure that they will come back to court and help them to come back to court and make those court appearances. On the negative side, if someone shows a history of what we call failure to appear, that could be a factor in us not recommending their release, that they would stay in jail pending that court date. So that would be one factor. The other factor, of course, is dangerousness to the community. If someone's poses such an unreasonable risk of danger, we don't want to have that person out on the streets. There's many people, regardless of income, that could be suitable for release, and those are the people that we're going to look to target as part of this project.
Will they wear an ankle bracelet, or does probation follow up with them, or is it just?
We will be following up with them. As to the first point, part of what we can do is to remind them of their obligations, a simple telephone call, electronic notifications at one end of the spectrum, all the way to potential home visits by probation officers to knock on their door, to check in with people for the highest risk of that population. And everything in between, I do believe that our budget includes some funding for GPS. We don't anticipate putting GPS on everybody or even the majority of people, but we do believe that that's a useful tool when appropriate.
Case by case,
Yeah.
okay. Wow, congratulations. I'm hopeful that maybe there will be success with it, and we can find a way to relieve our population in the jails.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
support.
And I also wanted to ask the sheriff regarding HOT, are there specific areas? Good morning.
Good morning.
Are there specific, everybody loves HOT in my district. They have done an amazing job, and they've responded so well. And I even have, I have people actually calling me saying, please don't let HOT go. And so I'm happy that maybe POP can backfill, some of those activities if there's a kind of a dip in services. But what I'm curious about, is there an area where the HOT team, is it from the parks that the HOT team is going to be eliminated, or what will be the geographic assignment for HOT? Will they still be in all areas of the county and in the parks, and then POP will backfill? How's that going to work?
So currently what we have is we have 2 teams of 4, one deployed what we call north of the river and the other south of the river. So there's a total of 8 HOT officers working 7 days a week. With this reduction, we'll be going down to 2 teams of 2. We'll be combining them into a single team of 4, and they'll be working county-wide and only 4 days a week rather than 7-day-a-week coverage.
Do you feel like there will be a dip in coverage or services associated with that? And what can we tell our constituents who love HOT? How can we?
Well, obviously, the continuity we have with the 7-day-a-week coverage is probably going to be the biggest loss that we have, because we have the continuity of teams passing on that information and doing a 7-day-a-week operation. When we have the 4-day-a-week operation go to the work week, it's going to suffer. And we looked at potentially, and I say that this is kind of the plan now. There's always room to look at intelligence-led policing and maybe distribute it better. But as we look at it right now, that's where we're headed, is for the 4-day-a-week coverage, because the 2 teams of 2 are really not enough to handle the workload, 7-day-a-week coverage. So we have to collapse them down to 4-day-a-week.
So on crime situations like in the Parkway, rangers and other deputies will fill in.
Correct. We expect to see a pretty big increase back into our calls for service for our normal 911 type operations, especially on those days off where patrol and the various other functions that have now been relieved of some of those calls are now going to be incurring those calls again.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did have a question to follow on. Thanks for coming over, Phil. So just understanding that, because I think, again, that was part of the very lengthy discussion we had about how we could deploy. We'll obviously get the coverage, on 7 days a week, and certainly make sure that it was viable for other areas of the county, recognizing that, you may have a focus on a given neighborhood or on the Parkway or calls in the north or south area of the county. In the discussions, obviously the teams are constructed with a sergeant and 5 officers. Was there any conversation, or is there any other model that would, it might still be a reduction, but still leave in place some additional officers to get that coverage, or is the maximum you can have is 5 and then 1 sergeant, or is there some other way to deploy with the supervision that's important in deployment that we could look at for our consideration that, might be something in between, but actually maximize recognizing the budget constraint to get more coverage? Because the realities are that when your officers are called upon, you're that having a dedicated team, and I think the effectiveness of it, because again, I've shared with you and with the sheriff and certainly with colleagues in this setting even that that we are seeing I think a significant positive impact, and that coupled with not just with the sheriff but with the social workers and others who accompany them oftentimes in the community, that's it is making a difference. And I think people are seeing certainly the responsiveness that comes with having the dedicated resources and personnel. So I guess my question to you is that is there, beyond the model we adopted with the teams of 5 in the supervision, is there some way we could retain 2 additional officer positions and still have the supervision that would be necessary and get either more days of the week or the ability to respond? Because we're already kind of thin, I think, at times, and so that's my question.
I mean, it's possible an additional 2 persons underneath the sergeant would work fine. There wouldn't be a supervision
so you could actually
problem.
have a little bigger complement under.
Wouldn't be a supervision problem there. It's just then developing some type of work schedule that might work out for a 7-day-a-week coverage. So.
Or 6.
Or 6.
Yeah, and then having the ability to, because what I see, again, I appreciate the creativity, is that what the problem-oriented policing is that, they're dealing with nuisance activities, with other criminal activity, and, they can supplement from time to time, but if we begin to pull them off, then, I mean, the net effect is you have obviously less coverage and you're trying to spread it in a way that still maintains that effectiveness to the degree that you can. So if there were additional funded positions, then that's workable from the standpoint of deployment of folks. And
it is something that we, when we cut this, when we say we cut 5 hot team deputies, keep in mind that 8 of those are in the field, 2 of those are assigned to our work release, which runs our inmate crews to come out and collect trash and camp cleanups and stuff like that. So one of those got cut, so now we have that one person handling the 4 days a week with our team of 4. So if we expand that, we're still short that individual to assist with camp cleanups and picking up garbage and that
so
type
what
of
if you
thing.
had 3 positions? That give you, would you put the one back with, so you'd have the 2? Again, I'm just, I know this is,
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible, yeah.
It'd give you 2 to the teams in the field and
And then
allow you
expand it
free-
maybe not to 7 days, but 5 days or 6 days or something like that. Something we could surely look at.
I would just say, I think that, that's allowed us to keep up with some of the issues out there, certainly not just the trash removal, but being constant in again, I'll just, again, speak for the neighborhoods I represent. I know it's made a big difference, and you've been responsive, and you've gone even to the far South County where, the homelessness doesn't know any boundaries as it relates to, and then some of the activities that come with that, I think have worked with bringing resources there, not just the sheriff's resources, but to complement other folks that go along with you. So, okay, thanks.
Supervisor Peters.
So I guess
Good
I'm
morning.
going, good morning, Phil. Repeat how much the community likes their hot teams and the pop team, and what a good job they do, not only in helping the homeless get services and making sure the trash that comes out of that activity is picked up, but also they're a very good representative for your agency.
Thank you.
So I had a couple of questions. The homeless outreach team has a special email address, so where residents can send their comments or questions, ask for help. Will the POP team who's filling in be picking up those messages? Have you gotten to that level of detail yet?
At this point, we haven't discussed down to that particular thing. If I was to answer that question to you right now, my answer would be no. They would, because the duties would start expanding, and then POP would be pulled from their POP duties of answering their POP emails, likewise of hot emails. So it's something, again, that we could explore, but as I stand here right now, my answer, if I were to say it, would be no. They would be dedicated back to what they're truly doing.
I think you should consider it. Then the other is just trying to understand the number of people that are in the hot department, if you will, because I had a document thought there were 12, and does that include? What is that? Is that correct? And what is that? How do the jobs lay out?
The true hot team consists of 10 officers total with a sergeant. We had 2.
So that's 11.
Yes, total
Okay.
for 11 with 10 officers and 1 supervisor. So it's 11.
Okay.
And 8 of those hot deputies are in the field. 2 are assigned to work release, and then the supervisor oversees the entire group.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so now where we're at is, if that's the end of this part of the presentation, okay. We do have 2 more presentations specific to, we're going to hear from the Department of Human Assistance. We're also going to hear from the Department of Child, Family, and Adult Services. At that time, I will take the cards that have been turned in as those presentations come, and we will have the public comment following each presentation. I do have a few cards that are titled General Budget. If those people who turned in those cards are going to address something that is specifically the Department of Human Assistance or the Department of Child, Family, and Adult Services, I ask that you wait until after that presentation. So right now, I will take public comment on those cards, which were General Budget, and the first is David Ramirez.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is David Ramirez. I'm a representative of Sacramento ACT and Building Healthy Communities. And I also sit as a member of the Healthy Partners Advisory Board. And I want to say that one of the best things I think that the board has done in recent years has been to establish the Healthy Partners Program. I have thanked you for that in past years when I come before you, and I thank you again now. The staff has done an extraordinary job providing primary care services to undocumented Sacramentans who have no other access to affordable health care. Lives have been saved, literally, and working people are able to provide for their families as their health needs have been met successfully. There are issues, though. The board allocated over $2 million for specialty care. This money has largely been returned each year because that specialty care was never provided. Healthy Partners was not equipped to provide specialty care. The care is needed but not provided. Most of the limited specialty care provided through Healthy Partners was in fact provided on a voluntary basis by local physicians and others through the SPIRIT program. Healthy Partners has now developed the infrastructure to provide the needed care. The care is needed. And the other area of concern is outreach. If you've seen in your annual report each year, there is a listing of what is the source of new patients, and the largest source of new patients is always referral by friends and family members. And the other significant source of new patients is community organizations such as Sacramento Covered and La Familia. So, again, this is something that Healthy Partners in recent times has taken steps to do in cooperation with, again, community partners to, in a serious way, go out with an outreach program and find people to participate in this program. There are very many who have not been able to take advantage because they don't know about it. The county's not telling them about it. So please, full funding is needed to address the community needs fully. Do not approve this 20% cut in the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Gerald Gibbons, followed by Diana Campos.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for letting me speak today. Prompted by an uptick in crime in the Arden Arcade area and the often heard comment that there are not enough resources for the Sheriff's Department to adequately patrol that large area, I respectfully request an increase in budget allocation to the Sheriff's Department. On a related note, an effective approach to addressing the homeless/drug problem is depicted in the documentary Seattle is Dying. It's about enforcement and intervention. Sacramento is dying. The Arden Arcade area is dying. I believe you and we as a community have an opportunity to turn that around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Selena Campos, and I'm an organizer with Sacramento ACT. As someone who has lived her whole life in Sacramento, North Natomas, and as an undocumented American, we continue to fight to become a county that values our families. Our families are hardworking, tax-paying residents of Sacramento. We've been forced to return to a life in the shadows, uncertain of this nation's future. Healthy Partners allows our families to feel safe and stay healthy, knowing that at least there is a basic health program that is available to us. Cutting funding is not only an assault on our community, but proves that our priorities do not align. I had a leader here earlier who had to leave to go to work. She is undocumented and will have to live the rest of her life with a brain tumor. Because of programs like Healthy Partners, she now has access to medication that will allow her to work and to sustain her family. The medication without the program would cost her over $200. That's money that our community does not have to spare. Healthy Partners saves lives. It's saving hers. I urge you to not cut any funding to Healthy Partners.
Thank you. Robert Ives. Tara Kolvenbeck. Yes, I know, but we're not hearing animals specifically later, so this is a general budget question.
Okay, so you're taking animal stuff up now? Is that, oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Just for public comment.
Oh, for public comment, but but I mean, so if people want to...
Unless they want to wait through lunch, I don't see the...
Well, I didn't know. I think people were waiting to see. I thought we were going to take all the presentations first, and so you're taking animal...
No, I said that we're going to... All right, let me rephrase.
Well, no, I heard you say it.
We're going to hear those two specific departments, and after which we're going to hear comments from each one. This is for everything that's kind of a catch-all that's not in those two departments.
Okay, and I didn't know that. When you said general budget is comments about our budget in general, but you're talking about budget units of folks that want to be here on animal care.
Everything other than human assistance and child, family, and adult services.
Okay. All right, I didn't know that. Okay.
Good morning, Chair and all board members. Thank you for having me. I'm Tara Kolvenbach. I'm with the Whisker Warriors Animal Defense Fund. I'm the executive director, and I really appreciate that you've, for animal services, you've restored some of the funding, so I appreciate that. I also appreciate you gave me some of the grant money in the TOT grant, and that was wonderful. A lot of people in the county have taken advantage of that. So I think Sacramento County is truly moving forward in great directions for reducing animal overpopulation. But please don't take away any of the funding, because all of these people are volunteers. Some of them are here today. And the trap, neuter, and return and the homeless cat community in our communities, they really need this funding. If we stop our progress, all our work will be for nothing. Cats are prolific breeders. 2 cats that are unaltered will result in thousands of cats in a few years. We're just treading water. So I'm just looking forward. My team, the Whisker Warriors, we're dedicated to reducing animal overpopulation through free spay-neuter programs. We want everyone to spay and neuter their animals. We trap homeless cats and get them altered. We're all volunteers, and free spay-neuter for homeless cats is just vital for our community. Without grant funding such as TOT grants and progressive cities like Rancho Cordova that give us grants, and the funding you provide through the free Sunday clinics, we couldn't help so many animals. We have not turned the corner yet. We have so much work to do to get the homeless cat population under control. Do not cut our funding until we can get there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, and then just one other thing. I'm in full support of the HOT program, and I don't think you should cut that at all.
Thank you very much.
I agree with.
Don, it's general
Okay.
budget questions. Thank you very much. Linda Olander.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for all the information. This is the first time I've attended one of these meetings, so it's been very informative. I am a volunteer foster with Itsy Bitsy Rescue. We are a very small organization. We have about 30 fosters that take in kittens. I personally, so far this kitten season, which began in March, I think I have 12 in-house right now, bottle babies that started out 0 to 5 weeks and took in a half a dozen puppies. They would have nowhere to go and would have been put down. They are all now going to be spayed and neutered and put into new homes. We need the funding to continue for Bradshaw to be able to go and help them pull those babies out of their facility and put them into fosters, to be able to raise them to be loving social animals, to be able to stay into forever homes. Without that funding, we can't do it. So I'm asking that you really consider what's happening with the fosters, with the thousands of animals, literally thousands of animals that are in foster homes right now, volunteer homes. These are homes that are not costing the county anything, but we do need the funding for Bradshaw and for SPCA to be able to continue the spay and neuter programs to reduce the overpopulation that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Weaver.
I'm Rebecca Weaver. I am the volunteer coordinator and community outreach volunteer for Itsy Bitsy Rescue. I personally have 14 kittens in my home right now that are in foster. Over the past 7 years, we have worked tirelessly with Bradshaw Shelter and the other shelters to save lives that are under 5.5 weeks old. They come to us, we nurture them, we care for them, we also put them into loving families. I also am working with several different of the feral colony trappers. Last night at our board meeting, one of them was there, who's also on our board, and she has worked with the community in Fair Oaks. They were at a 0 population after 4 years. That meaning that no more animals were being born in that population. Unfortunately, due to an uneducated public, there are new babies. Those babies will be spayed and neutered, released back into the community. This is where Bradshaw and the other shelters support is necessary. We ask you, please do not defund any of these programs or cut the funding. We cannot handle more. We are at 140 plus at a 75 capacity rescue. We are very small. We are not one of the large rescues. I would hate to see what would happen with a large rescue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ken Altine?
Thank you. I'm Ken Altine. I'm the CEO of the Sacramento SPCA. I appreciate this chance to talk. I'll start by appreciating the partial reinstatement of the funding for the spay-neuter programs. But if I understand right, this crisis is not going away after this year, this financial crisis, the lawsuits. So I worry that I'm going to be back here in 12 months to have this exact same conversation to fight for an even smaller portion of this. So we worked with partners, the SPCA, Whisker Warriors, Itsy Bitsy, Coalition for Community Cats, Rob Leonard, Dave Dickinson. We met for weeks. We worked to develop a program that not only was effective to address the community cats, but also was sustainable, with the bulk of that funding coming from sources not the county, coming from my donors, coming from individuals, coming from Whisker Warriors. So we put this together, and we put together this program, and then I guess I'm as much concerned about the process that threatened these programs without any consideration or any communication or any conversation or any problem solving to address the issue, that this was just a decision that was made, and now we're here fighting to get part of it back or all of it back. So I really want to help you understand that you can't just put a pause on this program. You can't just say, oh, we won't do as many this year, or we'll stop it for this year and pick it up next year. The cats don't take a break. The cats we miss by reducing these funds will have more cats, who will have more cats, who will have more cats. And these aren't the cats that you see in your neighborhood that are shiny coats. These are cats who have to fight for their existence. They have to face disease. They spread that disease to your constituents' domestic cats. This is a problem that will cost you more in the long run. So even a $50,000 savings will cost you hundreds of thousands in 311 calls, in constituent complaints, in ACO calls, and in putting these animals into the overcrowded shelter, which then threatens the live release rate, which was the stated goal from animal control, is the one thing they did not want to impact. This decision to cut even $50,000 will have the exact opposite impact on your goal of your live release rate. Let's work together on this. Let's do this together as we've been doing it for the past several years, and we will continue to address the problem, but you have to be in it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Natoli.
Yeah, Ken, if I could, didn't want to diminish your applause there. And certainly as the speakers that have preceded you, obviously the value and worth of the program and what it means to, I think, both those that would potentially enter the shelter in the future, but I think just to the general health and welfare of our community, as you've said, I don't think can be overstated. The amount of money that you get under contract working with the county and other partners in this, and I heard you correct, the SPCA then supplements. I mean, you come together with either your own dedicated staff or can you just maybe share what it means, at least on the SPCA side, as you know, of what you bring to the table to complement the dollars that are part of this contract?
Absolutely. We worked on a program. Rob, Dave, we did that, 2.5 years ago. We sat and week after week, we really hammered this out to say, what would it take to have the community cat program that we run at the SPCA every Sunday at no cost to residents? And we came up with the $65,000. So of that $110,000 on that top line, $65,000 of it goes to the Sacramento SPCA for this program.
Okay.
Our hard cost just for the 2 vets and the staff is well over $70,000 just for the SPCA staff, not counting any of the supplies, any of the utilities, the oxygen, the anesthesia, things like that. So then we reached out to partners like the Coalition for Community Cats, who said that we will sponsor the first Sunday. So we'll give you an additional $1,500 for the first Sunday of every month to sponsor it. The county will use the $65,000 to sponsor the second and the third. And then we went to private donors like Zoe McRae and others in our community who said, I will sponsor the 4th Sunday. And then we at the SPCA sponsored the 5th Sunday. So this was a coalition that came together that really said, let's not put the burden on the government or on the nonprofit sector. Let's work together to do this. And, most of us have lived in communities where there is a big day of spay, where everyone gets together and one day we're going to round up as many feral cats as we can and we're going to get them spayed. And success is 3 or 4 or 500 cats in one day. Well, that was the month of May for us because we do it every Sunday. We do 70 to 110 cats every Sunday at no cost to our community because of this coalition. So to find out yesterday morning that this was just being blown away with no conversation and no real opportunity to rework that solution we put together really was disheartening.
So, and I know this amount, we worked on this over a period of years, and it didn't start out at this, but I think the $110,000, we kind of looked for a number of spay neuters that we wanted to achieve in the community, and again, a collective body of work. And I guess the other question I just wanted to ask then, in your sense of, sort of not just animal wellness, but in community benefits here, what would you estimate that it's saved as far as numbers that enter the shelter? I mean, when you deal with feral colonies and community cats and so forth, I mean, is there any way to put a tag it out? Because there are savings. If it doesn't come through SPCA or county shelter or city shelter, then there are, net savings, just not for even housing and vaccinating and all the things that go with tending to the animal and or dogs, but in large parts the cats here. Any idea what the savings accrue to or the numbers?
Yeah, we can take a start of that, because right now between Bradshaw, the city shelter at Front Street, and ourselves, we have 1,000 kittens in foster care. So these are 1,000 kittens who will not reproduce. If we weren't here and if the program to spay them wasn't here, this would be 1,000 kittens who would generate at least 2,500 more kittens next year, which would produce 10,000 more kittens by 2021. So if you just say the cost to send an ACO out and get that sick cat or that injured cat or that nuisance cat and bring it in, and then just the vaccinations for them, you're talking about $15 for the vaccinations, plus the cost of bringing them in, plus the cost of housing them for, remember, these cats are going to be housed for a week or more just to get returned to the field. So even at $15 a day, times 10,000 cats, times 5, you start to see the impact that these cats will reproduce. They will be a problem. This county will need to solve that problem. You will spend more solving the problem than you will preventing the problem. That's just a fact.
Well, thanks, Ken. I know that we all received a lot of correspondence. I think it goes to the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think that's one of the strategies that we've been certainly trying to improve live release rate, but is to also stem the flow of cats and to work with our colonies, feral colonies, and with our community cats. And so I appreciate the comments that you've made. I think it puts a perspective that's important. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right, with that, my mic's up. With that, it is approaching 12:30, so we do have 2 lengthy presentations to be made. So I'm going to suggest that we break for lunch and come back at 2 o'clock and hear those items in the afternoon. Mr. Gill, you go with that? Yes. All right. Then we will recess till 2 o'clock.